Chapter 2352. The surroundings were quiet and no one appeared. Dumpling crossed her two small arms. "I've already helped you so much and you don't even want to thank me?" A moment later, a scarlet fruit was thrown over. Dumpling grabbed the fruit. Cinnabar fruit? A bright light flashed in her eyes. This was her favorite fruit, one of them. Ever since she started cultivating in Fengming Mountain, she hadn't eaten anything delicious for a long time. She happily held the cinnabar fruit and was about to put it into her mouth, but when it reached her mouth, she held it back and pouted as she looked in the direction where the fruit was thrown. "Don't think that a single cinnabar fruit can buy me off." Umph. Another cinnabar fruit was sent over. Dumpling raised her hand to catch it and put the fruit into her bosom. "Two won't do. Today you have to come out and let me see." As she spoke, she lifted her foot and walked forward. Swish, a slight sound of something tearing through the air rang out. Then Tuanzi saw a blurry shadow flashing in front of her eyes. She gritted her teeth, tipped her toes, and immediately flew forward. "Let's see where you're going this time." She couldn't catch up the previous few times, but this time she had to see it clearly no matter what. That thing ran very quickly and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared without a trace. Dumpling stopped and looked down at the cinnabar fruit in her hand. A rich fruity fragrance was emitted from it, causing people to drool. She licked her lips and resisted the urge to eat it. "Wanna run? It's not that easy." The smell of this cinnabar fruit could stay on a person's body for several days. It didn't matter if she couldn't see it. Following this smell, she could still find him. Dumpling wrinkled her nose, then followed the faint fragrance in the air and ran forward. A quarter of an hour later, Dumpling stopped in front of the barrier between Fengming Mountain and the illusory god palace. She frowned. Could it be inside? That was where the fragrance had disappeared. She looked up and down, left and right. This barrier descended from the sky, completely isolating them from the outside world. If he wanted to leave this place, the only way was to go through the barrier. No wonder. Dumpling suddenly understood. Previously she couldn't find him at all. So he had actually run back to the illusory god palace? To think that she had been searching Fengming Mountain recently. She had almost dug 3 feet into the ground, but she still couldn't find him. In the end, he was looking in the wrong direction. She hesitantly glanced at the barrier in front of her. "How do I get there?" "All right." Suddenly her eyes lit up. She held the 2 cinnabar fruits in her left hand and gently waved her right hand, summoning the ancestor golden feather. "If I remember correctly, this thing can directly pass through the barrier," Dumpling thought and waved her hand gently. Buzz, a crack quickly appeared on the barrier. Success. Dumpling was pleasantly surprised. She quickly entered. Abundant heaven and earth energy instantly surged in from all directions. Dumpling took a deep breath and felt cool all over. Fengming Mountain was good, but it was a little hot. Therefore, when he suddenly came out from the inside, he was still not used to it. Dumpling turned around to take a look. The crack had already quietly closed. The surroundings were also quiet, as if no one had noticed her arrival. Dumpling blinked. This barrier seemed to be very easy to pass through. She put away the ancestor golden feather and sure enough she caught the other party's remaining aura in the air. "Over there." Dumpling confirmed the direction and quickly rushed over. A sound rang out in the quiet courtyard. Something suddenly drilled into the pile of fallen leaves, raising countless flying leaves. After a moment, an indifferent and quiet voice came from the room. "You sneaked to Fengming Mountain again?" The pile of fallen leaves remained motionless. "Have you forgotten what I warned you before?" There was a hint of coldness in that voice. The courtyard was deathly silent. At this moment, a series of knocks came from outside. Knock knock. "Is anyone there?" A crisp and soft voice came from outside. The conversation in the room abruptly stopped. Outside the door, Dumpling's face revealed a smug and proud smile. "Hee, this is your home, right? I've already found you here. Are you still not willing to come out?" She was very sure that the other party was definitely here, because that was where the smell had disappeared. Originally, she wanted to go in directly, but there was a layer of barrier outside the courtyard. She thought about it and felt that it was not appropriate to force her way in, so she obediently chose to knock on the door. Since he had already chased her here, there was no reason to hide, right? After waiting for a while, it was still quiet inside. There was no response. Dumpling knocked on the door again. Knock knock knock. "I'm not a bad person, why aren't you coming out?" Still no one answered. Dumpling waited for a while longer, a little angry, and pouted. "If you don't come out, I'll go in myself." After saying that, she placed her hands on the door and moved her chubby little face closer. wanting to peek through the crack in the door. Unfortunately, although this courtyard was not big, the quality of the courtyard door was excellent. She widened her grape-like eyes and spun them around, but she still couldn't see anything. "How can this be?" Dumpling muttered softly. She had done him a huge favor. Was she going to leave 2 cinnabar fruits behind just like that? "Why are you here?" The voice of a woman filled with astonishment came from behind. Dumpling turned her head to look. The person who came was Xu Jing. Dumpling pursed her lips and ignored her. She pressed her face against the door again and secretly exerted force with both hands. Perhaps she could really open the door and go in to take a look. However, her behavior was extremely arrogant and presumptuous in Xu Jing's eyes. "What are you doing?" Xu Jing frowned. This dumpling not only left Fengming Mountain, but also ran to the first divine envoy's place to behave atrociously? What was she doing, trying to force her way in? Dumpling pretended that she did not hear her. Xu Jing was infuriated. She had come to find the first divine envoy this time to solve the problem of the barrier in Herb Mountain. After the abnormal situation that day, she did not care much and hurried back to the palace of the illusory god. She wanted to ask for help, but she was scolded and ridiculed by the second divine envoy. Helpless, she could only go back and think of a solution herself. In fact, she was also holding back her anger in her heart. After so many years, she still had not been able to solve the problem of the barrier. She was also anxious. That day when she had been slapped by Little 8, she was already angry enough. Now, the second divine envoy's words had completely enraged her. She simply chose to go into seclusion and think of a solution no matter what. However, how could this problem be solved so easily? She had a headache thinking about it day and night, but it still did not work. Helpless, she could only hold on to her last hope and ask the first divine envoy for help. However, she bumped into Dumpling as soon as she arrived. She stepped forward and pulled Dumpling. "This is not a place where you can come." Chapter 2353. However, before he could touch Tuanzi, he suddenly felt an invisible pressure coming at him. Xu Jing was shocked and quickly dodged. However, she was still forced to take a few steps back and almost fell to the ground. She hurriedly steadied herself and looked up in bewilderment. Was this the barrier of the first divine envoy? However, Dumpling was clearly standing in front of her, so why wasn't she attacked at all? Dumpling looked back at her again. Her beautiful big eyes blinked a few times and she giggled. "It seems that the people inside don't like you very much." Xu Jing was so angry that she almost choked. "What nonsense are you talking about?" "How am I talking nonsense?" Dumpling stretched out her hand and gestured. "I haven't entered the courtyard yet, but you can't even get close to the door." This was a stark difference between them. Anyone would be able to see that. Xu Jing was angry and her face turned red and white. Actually, she wasn't the one who was strange but Dumpling. Previously, when she and the seventh divine envoy came here, they also couldn't get close to the door. However, when she saw Dumpling leaning on the door and looking inside, she forgot for a moment. Now that she thought about it, it was obvious that Dumpling was too close. What was the first divine envoy thinking? Could it be because of Dumpling's identity? But shouldn't she be at Fengming Mountain now? Thinking of this, Xu Jing's expression changed. "How did you get past that barrier?" Dumpling glanced at her and muttered softly, "It's none of your business." As she spoke, she knocked on the door again. "If you don't come out, I'm really going to kick the door down." Xu Jing trembled with fear as she listened. Who was she talking to? The first divine envoy? Impossible. However, there was no one else in this courtyard other than the first divine envoy. At this moment, another person arrived. "Dumpling, what are you doing?" His voice was low and carried a hint of displeasure. When Xu Jing saw him, she quickly bowed. "Greetings, second divine envoy." Yu Qian's eyes swept over her, but he didn't linger on her for long. He only looked at Dumpling. Not long after he left Fengming Mountain, he sensed that Dumpling had also come out. He was shocked and immediately set out to search everywhere. In the end, he found this place. Dumpling turned around and looked at Yu Qian with hostility. "It's none of your business." His tone was very aggressive. Xu Jing frowned and sneered in his heart. The second divine envoy usually looked gentle, but he wasn't easy to get along with. What he hated the most was when someone contradicted him. Dumpling had spoken so rudely, so she had to be taught a lesson. However, what shocked her was that Yu Qian didn't seem to be angry. He stared at Dumpling for a moment and said, "Didn't we agree before that you would cultivate well in Fengming Mountain? What are you doing now?" Dumpling snorted. "Fengming Mountain is so boring, can't I come out for a walk?" Yu Qian narrowed his eyes. "You came out on your own?" Dumpling's heart skipped a beat. She raised her small face. Yes. I opened the barrier myself with the ancestor's golden feather. What's wrong? Yu Qian paused. It's not impossible for you to come to the palace of the illusory god. The second divine envoy? Xu Jing was shocked. What kind of place was this? How could Dumpling come and go as she pleased? Looking at her arrogant and despotic appearance, who knew what she would do in the future? Yu Qian gave Xu Jing a warning look. It was not her place to intervene in this kind of matter. Xu Jing felt a chill run down his spine. He quickly lowered his head and swallowed the rest of his words. However, his hands were tightly clenched in his sleeves, and his knuckles turned white. She was the 8th divine envoy and should be high and mighty. But now, anyone could ride on her head and behave atrociously. Yu Qian looked at Dumpling. However, there are some places you can go and some places you can't. This is the residence of the first divine envoy. You are not allowed to disturb her in the future. His expression remained the same, but there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. Dumpling pursed her lips. She was extremely smart. She knew when to make a fuss and when not to. Just like now, Yu Qian was definitely not joking. She gritted her teeth and snorted softly. If you don't want to come, then don't. There are plenty of places to play here anyway. After saying that, she walked away with her little legs. Halfway through, she suddenly thought of something and turned back to look at Yu Qian. Who in the palace of the illusory god has a magical beast? Yu Qian raised his eyebrows. Among the divine envoys, only I am responsible for guarding the mythological beast. Dumpling pursed her lips and turned to leave. Yu Qian followed her. If you are really bored, I can show you around. But he would never allow Tuanzi to run around here by herself. Dumpling was very tired of him. She wished she could never see his annoying face again. But she also knew that if she really wanted to see what the palace of the illusory god was like, she really had to let him follow her. Crutch. She picked up the cinnabar fruit in her arms and took a fierce bite. Seeing that Yu Qian really left with Dumpling, Xu Jing gritted her teeth in hatred. What the hell? She was just a member of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. She was really arrogant. She didn't even put her, the 8th divine envoy, in her eyes. But the second divine envoy thought highly of her. Needless to say, as long as Dumpling didn't make any big mistakes, she would be able to do whatever she wanted here for a long time. Xu Jing was very angry, but she also knew that there was nothing she could do. Dumpling's existence was too important to the palace of the illusory god. Otherwise, the second divine envoy wouldn't spoil her so much. She turned her head to look at the closed door. From beginning to end, the first divine envoy didn't say a word. This was undoubtedly a tacit approval of the second divine envoy's actions. No matter how much she said, it was useless. After calming down the emotions in her heart, she finally remembered her purpose for coming here. First divine envoy, the barrier at the Herb Mountain is starting to have problems again. That's your business. An indifferent and cold voice came from within. I've given you so much time to deal with it. If you still can't solve it, then no one can help you. Xu Jing's face turned pale. But that barrier was... Her voice suddenly stopped. She didn't dare to say what she was going to say next. No one dared to mention what happened back then. It was best to leave it as a blur in the dust of time. That was a taboo in the palace of the illusory god. She clearly knew this. After hesitating for a long time, seeing that the first divine envoy really didn't intend to do anything, she finally gave up and bowed to leave. Xu Jing will take her leave. After leaving, Xu Jing originally wanted to go back to her residence. But halfway there, the fire in her heart burned more and more fiercely. The first divine envoy, the second divine envoy, and the others were all watching with folded arms. Were they really planning to make things difficult for her? Recently, unlucky things had happened one after another, and it almost made her collapse. She couldn't just let everyone step on her head. Thinking of this, she turned around and walked out of the palace of the illusory god. The matter of the barrier at the Herb Mountain couldn't be solved in a short time. She might as well go and get back at Little Hatchie first. Chapter 2354. She couldn't afford to offend the two divine envoys, but she could still teach a lowly person without a bloodline totem a lesson. However, before she reached the door, she suddenly noticed something and stopped in her tracks. Then, the void in front of her began to shake. A tall and slender figure slowly appeared. She was stunned at first, but then she recognized the person, and a hint of surprise flashed in her eyes. Yin, where are you going? A cold voice sounded. Xu Jing was stunned and said subconsciously, I'm going out. You're not going to the Herb Mountain. The other party's tone was very certain. Xu Jing felt that something was wrong. Her eyes flashed and she said, "If I'm not going to the Herb Mountain, where else can I go?" The appearance and figure of the man opposite her were hidden behind the fluctuating void, and she couldn't see him clearly. However, Xu Jing seemed to be able to feel a pair of sharp and cold eyes staring at her. Her whole body tensed up. After a while she heard the other party say, "That's good." Xu Jing frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, during this period of time, you'd better not go anywhere except the illusory god palace and the Herb Mountain, and don't cause any trouble." Xu Jing's heart skipped a beat. Why did this sound so wrong? What did he mean by don't cause any trouble? He made it sound like she had been causing trouble all this time? Xu Jing felt a little uncomfortable, but she still forced a smile. "I understand." With that, the man turned around and was about to leave. "Wait." Xu Jing hurriedly stopped him. The man half turned around. "Is there anything else?" Xu Jing pursed her lips and asked nervously, "Nothing. It's just that I haven't seen you for a long time and I wanted to ask, how have you been?" After asking this, Xu Jing's face was faintly hot. This question seemed a little abrupt. "I've been very well." Unexpectedly, that person actually gave a reply. Xu Jing was stunned. In the past he would never say anything more, but this time, then? Xu Jing was about to continue speaking, but the void vibrated and the man had already left. Looking at the empty void in front of her, Xu Jing felt a little disappointed for a moment. But when she remembered that he had actually answered her question, her heart seemed to overflow with joy. After thinking for a while, Xu Jing gradually calmed the churning thoughts in her heart and began to think about what he had said before. Don't cause any more trouble and can only stay in the Herb Mountain and the illusory god palace? Did he suddenly come here today to tell her this? Could it be to warn her not to act rash action? Xu Jing. On the one hand, she wanted to find little Eight for revenge and get back the slap she gave him that day. On the other hand, the sudden arrival of this person also confused her. After thinking about it for a while, she finally put away her thoughts and decided to put the matter of little Eight aside. That person must have a deep meaning for suddenly saying all this. No matter how he thought about it, it was better to wait and see how things turned out. The courtyard was silent. Suddenly, an explosion came from one of the rooms. Bang! The sound shocked Hua Shuang so much that she pushed the door open and ran out. "What's wrong? What are you doing?" Smelling the burnt smell, he shouted at once, "Little Hachi! Little Hachi! Did you do something again?" Hearing Hua Shuang's voice, little Hachi, who had just run out of the house, felt wronged. "Second brother. I've been busy in my room. Which eye of yours saw me do something?" She held the door and stepped on her shoes carelessly. Her hands were stained with red. Little Hachi was also very angry. She was painting her nails when there was a sudden explosion. She was so shocked that her hands trembled. The bottle of flower dew that she had painstakingly prepared spilled just like that. Who could she reason with? Hua Shuang covered her face. "If it's not you, then who is it?" Cough, 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 it's me. A door at the side suddenly opened and thick black smoke floated out. A wretched figure ran out while coughing. Little Hachi's beautiful eyes were overflowing with killing intent. "Jian Feng, to compensate me for the flower dew." Jian Fengqi finally came to the yard with much difficulty and sat down on the stone bench before he could catch his breath. Wait for me to recover?" Hua Shuang glanced at him. "Jian Fengqi, are you refining pills or setting a fire? The house is about to be set on fire." Jian Fengqi's face was streaked with black and gray. His usual suave and handsome appearance was completely gone. Cough, I was in a hurry when I was refining pills. I was about to succeed. Almost, just a little bit. Next time it will definitely succeed. Next time? Little Hachi gritted her teeth in anger. When Yanqing returned, he saw this scene. He quickly glanced around and understood what had happened. When his gaze fell on little Hachi, he frowned slightly. Little Hachi was worried that she couldn't make a move in her current state, but when she saw Yanqing, she immediately perked up. "Brother Yanqing, hurry up and drag Jian Fengqi out. You're not allowed to come back until you successfully refine pills at the level of a senior doctor." Jian Fengqi knew something was wrong and immediately turned to Yanqing. "Brother Yanqing, don't listen to her." Yanqing stopped in his tracks. Little Hachi widened her eyes. "Jian Fengqi, you're shameless." Jian Fengqi said proudly, "It's just calling me brother, I know how to do it too." Bah! Little Hachi bent down angrily to pick up the shoe and threw it at him. Although Jian Fengqi failed to refine pills, he still had the ability to react. He immediately lay back and dodged the shoe. Then the shoe flew toward Yanqing. Smack. A sound was heard. Yanqing raised his hand and caught the shoe expressionlessly. The courtyard fell into a dead silence. Chapter 2355. Little Hachi was born enchanting and beautiful. She had always been very picky about what she ate and wore. She always used the best. Even her shoes were very exquisite and gorgeous. There were patterns drawn by her on them, and many colorful jade beads and jade chips were strung together. Under the sunlight, the shoes sparkled. When they swayed with the wind, they made a series of rustling sounds. However, at this moment, the shoes fell on an iceberg. Hua Shuangxuang silently looked away. This scene was too beautiful. He didn't dare to look at it. Ahem, I remember that I still have something to do. You guys go ahead. As he spoke, he swiftly retreated back into the house and closed the door with a pang sound. Jian Fengqi stiffly dragged his body back. Oh, I'll go back and clean the room. You guys go ahead. As soon as he took a step, a cold wind hit him. Whoosh. A bright and sharp long sword was already in front of him. He slowly turned his head and looked at Yanqing. Brother Yanqing, I can help you if you don't want your tongue. Yanqing opened his mouth. His voice was so cold that it seemed to be mixed with ice. Jian Fengqi immediately covered his mouth. I promise I won't do it again. Yanqing put away his sword. Jian Fengqi let out a long sigh of relief. Almost. That sword was going to cut off his handsome head. Although he had always been causing trouble at the 13th Yu, Yanqing was one of Rong Xiu's people. He didn't dare to offend him. Because this person could really bear to do it. Jian Fengqi's strong desire to live forced him to go against the wind and go back against the thick smoke. Compared to being cut by Yanqing, he would rather be choked to death. His figure quickly disappeared into the cloud of black smoke, and only a few coughs could be vaguely heard. Finally, only Yanqing and Little Hachi were left in the yard. Meeting Yanqing's gaze, Little Hachi felt a little embarrassed. She hid her bare foot behind her and coughed. Lord Yanqing, can you return my shoes to me? If they were ordinary shoes, she would just throw them away. But she really liked this pair of shoes. He had spent so much effort on this treasure, how could he just throw it away like that? Yanqing walked over. Little Hachi immediately became nervous. Was Yanqing planning to fight? Who wouldn't be angry if their shoes were thrown at them like that? But she didn't do it on purpose. It shouldn't be a problem if she talked to him nicely, right? While Little Hachi was thinking about this, Yanqing had already arrived at the door. There was a clear aura on his body, and one of his hands was holding a sword. On the other hand, the gorgeous and exquisite shoes in his other hand seemed very out of place. Little Hachi unconsciously tightened her hand on the door. She carefully looked at Yanqing, trying to find something from his face. Unfortunately, a certain someone's face was still as cold as ice, without the slightest bit of expression. It was really hard to guess. Then, Yanqing handed the shoes over. Little Hachi didn't take them. She stretched out her hand pitifully. There's something on my hand. I can't touch the shoes or they'll get dirty easily. Yanqing lowered his eyes and glanced at her slender and soft hand. Her white and jade-like fingers were indeed messily stained with a bit of red at this time. He paused, bent down and squatted down. Yanqing, Little Hachi was puzzled. Suddenly she heard him say in a low voice, "Give me your foot." Little Hachi was stunned and stretched out her bare foot subconsciously. Immediately after, a scorching hot palm grabbed her ankle. Little Hachi's first reaction was to withdraw, but Yanqing's hand was so strong that she couldn't break free. She twisted twice but it didn't work. "Don't move," Yanqing said. Little Hachi didn't dare to move at all. She looked down. Yanqing was squatting in front of her, helping her put on her shoes. She blinked. For some reason, there seemed to be a flame burning on her face. Her shoes were easy to put on. Yanqing quickly helped her put them on and then stood up. The two of them were standing very close to each other. When he suddenly stood up, Little Hachi suddenly felt as if there was an inexplicable sense of oppression enveloping her. She took half a step back. Yanqing pursed his thin lips slightly. "Sorry to offend you." Little Hachi hurriedly waved her hand. No, I should thank you." Yanqing nodded slightly. His face was as cold as ever. Without saying anything more, he turned and left. Little Hachi looked at his back and closed the door. She turned around and leaned against the door. She covered her chest and took a deep breath. On the other side, Yanqing went around the porch and suddenly stopped at the corner. He closed his eyes and exhaled. Treasure Pavilion, 2nd floor. Light flowed in front of Chu Luyue. Her eyes were fixed on the painting as she concentrated on completing the final stroke. Buzz, She had finally replicated the last Shen formation on the mythical flame diagram. Looking at the perfect Shen formation in front of her, her lips curled into a satisfied smile. It's finally over. She had been staying here all this time without sleeping or resting. Finally she had completed it all. She closed her eyes and rested for a while. She put the mythical flame diagram and the 2 replicated books back into the box before getting up. She opened the door and saw you waiting outside. Madam, you're finally out. Mingshu was so excited that tears filled his eyes. God knew how hard he had been waiting. At first he only came to take a look occasionally. But as time passed he became more and more worried about the situation inside. He simply chose to wait here all the time. Fortunately she was finally here. Looking at Yu's happy and excited face, Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh and handed the box over. I've already said that Lord Ming doesn't have to wait here. I'll naturally come out after I've replicated everything. Yu hurriedly took the box. When he heard Chu Luiyue's words, he suddenly came back to his senses and looked shocked. You've really? Chu Luiyue smiled. Lord Yu checked it personally. Mingshu swallowed a mouthful of saliva with difficulty and opened the box with trembling hands. It wasn't that he didn't trust Chu Luiyue, but this matter was just too unbelievable. Mingshu took out the 2 books that Chu Luiyue had replicated and looked at them carefully. Every time he turned a page, the shock in his heart increased. In the end, he was so shocked that he couldn't speak for a long time. All of them, she had actually replicated them all. How long had it taken? Chu Luiyue chuckled and asked. Lord Yu, if there's no problem, I'll take my leave first. Yu hurriedly stepped aside and said, Madam, you should go back and rest after expending so much energy. Chu Luiyue's lips curved up slightly as she shook her head. Lord Yu, you've misunderstood. I don't intend to go back and rest. Then Yu, I'm going to the star path. These few simple words caused Yu's heart to tremble. You're going to the star path and enter the palace of the illusory god? Chu Luiyue smiled and nodded. Yes. She had waited for too long before. Now she didn't want to wait any longer. Chapter 2356. Mingshu was shocked and didn't know what to say. After a while he stammered, But you've just finished these and need to rest. Even if she wanted to go to the Star Road, it would be better to rest first, right? Chu Luiyue's smile deepened. That's not necessary. It's just right to go now. On one hand, she had just copied all the Shen formations and mastered them. She was in her best state. On the other hand, she didn't know why, but she didn't feel tired after looking at the last Shen formation. Instead, she felt more energetic. At first, she didn't want to go directly, but now it seemed that the situation was progressing more smoothly than expected. Then it wasn't a bad idea to strike while the iron was hot. Seeing that Chu Luiyue had made up her mind, Mingshu couldn't persuade her anymore. Wait a moment, I'll go with you. As he spoke, he hurriedly returned the box to the room and followed her out. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. Lord Mingshu, you don't have to go through so much trouble, Mingshu explained. Madam, since you can copy all the Shen formations here, then you should be able to finish the Star Road this time. You have to know that no one has done it since the 7th Divine Envoy. Of course he wanted to witness it with his own eyes. Moreover, this was Madam. Chu Luiyue thought about it and agreed. Not only Mingshu, but everyone in the Illusory God Palace would probably come after hearing the news, as long as she could finish the Star Road. She nodded. Lord Mingshu, please? When Chu Luiyue and Mingshu arrived at the Star Road, there weren't many people here. It was very deserted. Mingshu explained, since Mu Yafeng was found to have cheated, everyone has been more cautious. Chu Luiyue nodded. She came to the place where she stopped last time and looked forward. The Star Road was long and flickering. The remaining Shen formations were the most complicated ones in the entire Star Road. But to her, it was something that had been deeply engraved in her mind. She held her breath and raised her finger gently. In the next moment, several streams of light flew out from her fingertips and intertwined in the air. So fast. Mingshu was shocked. This was a great Grandmaster Shen formation. Yet she was able to execute it so easily and smoothly. No wonder she could complete the entire mythical flame diagram in such a short period of time. She should have already memorized every single Shen formation on it, right? Soon, a stream of light flew up and suddenly bloomed above her head. Bang! The sound instantly spread far and wide. Without any hesitation, Chu Luiyue continued to move forward and started to set up the second Shen formation. At the same time, many people in the Illusory God Palace noticed the commotion. Is someone walking on the star path? Who is it? Why now of all times? Great Grandmaster Shen formation. Bang! Many people had yet to react when they saw the second Shen formation blossoming in midair. This time, everyone became excited. This speed is even faster than Mu Yafeng's. Don't mention Mu Yafeng. She cheated. That's why I'm so shocked. In this illusory god palace, who is more talented than Mu Yafeng? Wait, why does the person I'm knocking on look familiar? It looks like Shangguanyu? A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Everyone knew that Chu Liuyue's performance on the star path was indeed more outstanding than Mu Yafeng's. But the current situation was a little exaggerated. I remember that she stopped after entering the Great Grandmaster realm. Why is she starting again now? So fast? Could it be that she used some method like Mu Yafeng? Hiss. That's not possible, right? Mu Yafeng and the 7th Divine Envoy were just punished because of this. How could she go against the rules and commit a crime? Besides, there shouldn't be anyone who can help her, right? Let's go take a look. Xiao Ran also heard the commotion and ran over without thinking. On the way, Chu Liyue actually broke 2 more Shen formations in succession. When they arrived, there were already many people gathered here. Everyone's gaze was focused on Chu Liyue. Bang! Another Shen formation soared into the sky, shining brilliantly. The crowd who had rushed over fell into silence and could only stare blankly. Everything that was happening in front of them was far beyond their imagination, so much so that they didn't even know what to say. Chu Liyue turned a blind eye to all of this. Her expression was calm and persistent. Under her feet, the Shen formations lit up one after another, reflecting a dazzling light in her eyes. Looking from afar on the star path, light flickered. And the woman in red, as if she was stepping on the river of stars, moved forward. At the heavenly gate, Wu Yao brought the 2 girls to the place. Standing in front of the gate, Wu Yao looked at the heavenly gate and frowned. Aunt 11 and Xiao Ran looked at each other. 5th brother, is there a problem with the heavenly gate? Wu Yao touched his chin and nodded thoughtfully. I think there is. Aunt 12 asked softly, 5th brother, what's the problem? Wu Yao said seriously, this heavenly gate seems to have not been cleaned for a long time. The 2 of them, what kind of problem was this? Wu Yao clasped his hands. He didn't know why, but he just felt that something was wrong with this gate. Look, the angle of this gate is wrong. Aunt 11 was silent for a moment. 5th brother, if you don't go in, we'll leave first. Wu Yao coughed and hurriedly said, Don't. Let's go together. Chapter 2357. As the 3 of them spoke, a figure walked out from behind the barrier of the divine gate. It was a young man who looked to be in his 20s. He wore a blue robe and had an arrogant expression. He was holding a book in one hand and a pure gold feather in the other. Wu Yao hesitated when he saw him. May I ask if you are the 7th messenger? He remembered that his master had mentioned that the 7th messenger of the palace of the illusory god, Jinyun Lai, was in charge of guarding the divine gate. The young man frowned. No, I am the 11th messenger, Chiu Tong. The 7th messenger is no longer in charge of guarding the divine gate. Wu Yao and the others looked at each other. It seemed that something had happened in the palace of the illusory god. But this 11th messenger did not seem to be easy to talk to, so they did not ask. On the other hand, Chiu Tong's eyes were filled with disdain as she glanced at them. The 3 of you are exalted gods. How did you get here? Logically speaking, only Her Eminence could cross the illusory god ocean and reach the divine gate. The other exalted gods who had come before were only able to do so with Her Eminence's help. This was the first time that 3 exalted gods had come at the same time. Aunt 11 asked coldly. We have our own ways. We are already here. Do you still need to ask? Chiu Tong choked. He was a little angry, but seeing that the other party was a little girl, he did not want to continue arguing. As the divine consciousness guarding the divine gate, I naturally have to ask. How could these outsiders be so arrogant? Wu Yao saw this and immediately tried to smooth things over. Haha, 11th messenger, don't misunderstand. My sister is young and straightforward. Please don't mind her. We did use a divine artifact to get here. This shouldn't affect anything, right? Chiu Tong suppressed the anger in her heart and opened the book. Name. Wu Yao. Chiu Tong raised his hand and the golden feather swept across Wu Yao's forehead. It was empty. Chiu Tong frowned. No bloodline totem? He had heard that many cultivators without bloodline totem had come recently. He did not expect to meet one himself. He glanced at the 2 girls standing behind Wu Yao. You 2 come forward as well. Aunt 11 walked forward nonchalantly while Aunt 12 grabbed her sleeve nervously. Aunt 11 turned to look at her. We just don't have a bloodline totem. What are we afraid of? That's true. 12th mother thought about it and felt that it was very reasonable. Only then did she relax a little. Anyway, there was nothing to be afraid of. What was there to be afraid of? She then looked at Chiu Tong and said softly, "Dear Divine Envoy, the three of us don't have it. It doesn't matter whether you test it or not. It was better not to waste the effort." Chiu Tong was speechless. What's wrong with these people now? He didn't have a bloodline totem, so why did he seem so proud? This is not something to be proud of. Originally he wanted to ridicule him a little, but now that the other party had put it this way, he really couldn't spit out half a word. The hand holding the ancestor's golden feather gradually tightened. Name. And 11. 12 Nyang. Chiu Tong quickly wrote down the names of the two people on the booklet, then took out 3 dumplings and handed them over. This is dumplings. Aunt 11 didn't wait for him to finish. She raised her hand and took the items over. I've heard of them before. She kept one for herself and tied it around her waist. Then she handed one to Wu Yao and tied the last one for 12 Nyang. After that she looked at Chiu Tong. Now can we go in? Chiu Tong was speechless. The other party was so fierce that he was momentarily stunned. Aunt 11 said impatiently. We're in a hurry. This sentence reminded Chiu Tong. He glanced at them suspiciously. You guys are from Shangguanyu? Wu Yao laughed. You're really good, 11th Divine Envoy. You guessed it? Chiu Tong gritted his teeth. Was there a need to guess? They also didn't have a bloodline totem and were equally arrogant. There was really only one of them, no one else. Let's go in. He closed the booklet and didn't want to talk to them anymore. He turned around and left. Wu Yao winked at the 2 girls and quickly followed after him. Hey, 11th Divine Envoy, can I trouble you to ask where our master is now? Chiu Tong's expression turned colder. He didn't even turn around. Can't you see for yourselves? How can we see? Wu Yao was talking when he suddenly heard a sound in front of him. Bang. He subconsciously looked up and saw a profound formation slowly blossoming in midair. This is, Master is just in front. As Aunt 11 spoke, she pulled Aunt 12 and walked forward. It seemed like they came at the right time. Wu Yao was about to follow when he suddenly remembered something. He looked back at the divine gate and frowned. The heavenly gate was indeed very awkward to look at. 5th brother, what are you looking at? Seeing that Wu Yao did not follow, 12th Nyang looked back and raised her voice to shout. Of course her voice was still very soft. Wu Yao looked away. They're coming. The 3 of them walked forward along the star path. Many people had already gathered on both sides of the star path. At first glance it was crowded. But it was very quiet. Everyone seemed to have a tacit understanding. They kept silent and only stared at the figure on the star path, as if they were afraid of disturbing something. Wu Yao walked forward with the 2 girls. Because the 3 of them looked very unfamiliar, people gradually began to notice them. Chu Luiyue suddenly noticed something and looked back. When she saw the 2 faces that she hadn't seen for a long time, she was delighted. 11-12. Why are you here suddenly? Come here. Everyone heard and understood. So they knew each other. Aunt 11 pulled 12 Nyang forward and stood beside Chu Luiyue. Master. The 2 girls' faces were filled with longing and joy. Aunt 11 smiled, but 12 Nyang's eyes were already filled with tears. Master, my sister and I missed you so much. Chu Luiyue looked at the 2 and felt very emotional. These 2 girls were only a little older than little 13. When the incident happened, they were only 14 years old. In the blink of an eye, they became slim and graceful girls. Wu Yao also came over. Master. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. Wu Yao, why are you? Wasn't he guarding the gate realm in Peach Blossom Cove? Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat and she frowned slightly. Could it be that there? Wu Yao met her gaze and nodded imperceptibly. Chu Luiyue thought for a while and said, Wu Yao, take the 2 of them and wait. I'll be done here soon. Wu Yao responded. Yes. However, the onlookers all revealed looks of shock. Almost done? What did that mean? Chapter 2358. Was she planning to stop after a while or, bang? Chu Luiyue retracted her gaze and quickly drew another Shin formation. As another ray of light bloomed on top of her head, she lifted her feet and continued forward. Aunt 11 looked towards the end of the star path and narrowed her eyes. Master had made up his mind to go there this time? Suddenly 12 Nyang gently tugged on her sleeve. Aunt 12 turned around. Sister? Aunt 12 still had tears in her eyes and her nose and eyes were red. She leaned forward and whispered, Sister, is that the palace of the illusory god? Aunt 11 nodded. It must be. Aunt 12 pursed her lips. A dark light flashed in Aunt 11's eyes. Do you want to go in and take a look? Aunt 12 gently nodded and blushed as if she was embarrassed. I think I was thinking too much. On the way, she had heard from Fifth Brother that the palace of the illusory god was very powerful and not everyone could enter. Even her master had not been able to enter, let alone her. Aunt 11 said, I wanted to. Aunt 12 was stunned and did not speak. The two of them were twins. Although their personalities were different, they always had the same mind. Just like now, even if they did not speak, they knew what the other was thinking. They both wanted to enter the palace of the illusory god and take a look. Aunt 11 frowned and felt a little strange, because this idea came out of nowhere. But, when Master finished walking the star path, he could enter. Maybe they could find a chance later. Right at this moment, an extremely joyful voice suddenly sounded. Sister 11. Sister 12. The voice was soft and sweet. Even if they did not see the person, just hearing the voice made many people's hearts melt. Many people looked in the direction of the voice and saw a delicate and graceful figure coming towards them. As she walked, the colorful clouds danced and the broken jade tinkled. She was really beautiful. It was little Hachi. She was very fast and in the blink of an eye she was in front of Aunt 11. Oh, look at how beautiful my two sisters have become after not seeing them for a few years. Little Hachi's eyes lit up. She reached out and pinched the two girls' cheeks. Sister 8 missed you so much. Lady 12 blushed. Sister 8, we miss you too. It was rare for Aunt 11 to nod her head. How is Sister 8? Little Hachi smiled and rolled her eyes. When has Sister 8 ever had a bad life? Even in this illusory god palace, she was still very happy and carefree. Especially after she had slapped the 8th divine emissary Shu Jing a few days ago, her mood had become even better. Are you hungry? Sister 8 specially prepared a lot of delicious food for you guys. Aunt 11 said, Thank you, Sister 8. We had already eaten our fill at Third Brother's place before we came. Little Hachi clicked her tongue and shed tears of sympathy for Sanson. Based on his stinginess, wouldn't his heart and liver be in pain if these two girls went there? She touched their hair. Don't worry, there are countless treasures on the herb mountain here. Eat as much as you want. Lady 12 quickly waved her hand with a red face. Sister 8, this won't do. I said before that I can only eat until I'm 80 to 90% full. I can't eat as I please. If she really did that, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to control her strength. Little Hachi scratched her nose. Don't worry, with Sister 8 here, I can do whatever I want. Just as she finished speaking, another sound came from the front. Bang. Another Shen formation was successfully cast by Chu Luiyue. Little Hachi looked up with bright eyes. Master, are you planning to finish the star path? Seeing this, the surrounding people couldn't help but whisper. Isn't this speed too fast? The next one will be a Grandmaster Shen formation that starts with the word, heaven. Comparisons are odious. Even if he's cheating, he can't cast so many Shen formations in succession so smoothly, right? Looking at this formation, he's really planning to comprehend all the Shen formations and enter the illusory god palace? Look, the 5th divine envoy is here. The voice in the crowd instantly startled everyone, and they all turned their heads to look at the source of the voice. A young man in black who looked to be 27 or 28 years old was walking out of the illusory god palace. His figure was tall and straight and he was imposing without being angry. It was the 5th divine envoy, Ruan Jianfeng. In fact, he already knew about the movements on the Star Road. He just thought that Chu Luiyue would stop after walking for a while, so he didn't come. After all, he wasn't a Shen master like the 7th divine envoy. The 1st divine envoy had temporarily handed the Star Road to him, so he was only responsible for the Star Road to prevent any accidents. As for the others, he didn't know much, so he naturally couldn't interfere too much. But seeing that Chu Luiyue kept moving forward without any intention of stopping, he finally realized that something was wrong and finally moved. Chu Luiyue raised her eyes slightly and glanced at him. Seeing that he didn't seem to have any intention of continuing, she quickly retracted her gaze. The 5th divine envoy's sudden appearance was obviously just to see if she could complete the Star Road. Then, just let him watch. Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes and looked at the Shen formation in front of her. Heaven Illumination Illusory Formation, she muttered softly. She had a deep impression of this Shen formation. Because when she first came to the illusory god palace, she happened to encounter Mu Yafeng comprehending this Shen formation. More importantly, this was also the first Shen formation on the Heaven Scroll. Looking at the extremely familiar patterns, Chu Luiyue's emotions surged as countless memories surfaced one after another. Back then she didn't know that this was the so-called Great Grandmaster Xian formation. She only knew that Debao asked her to memorize it. For this heaven illumination illusory formation she was in the Red Moon Desert, under the scorching sun, drawing it on the sand over and over again. Even she couldn't remember how many times she tried before she finally memorized it. Now that she thought about it, all that was left in her memory was the wind that carried the coarse sand, the warmth that swept across her face and body. And when she finally succeeded in writing it down, Debao's rare sentence, "Very good." He almost never praised her. He was always extremely picky and strict. Therefore she remembered those two words for a very long time. For a very long time she only knew that she was learning from Debao, but she didn't even know what she was learning. Until many years later, when she had even experienced life and death, she finally understood that he had been planning for this day since then. Chu Liwei lightly exhaled and several rays of light flew out from her fingers. Every ray of light seemed to know their position clearly. They quickly gathered together and outlined the shape of a Xian formation. Before the crowd could even see it clearly, they only saw a flash of light in front of her. Then an indescribable pressure descended, bang. Heaven illumination illusory formation, break. Chapter 2359. All the noise disappeared in an instant. The surrounding space seemed to have solidified and everyone's expression froze. Everything was like a frozen picture. Only little Hachi and a few others were happy. Master is so powerful. Aunt 11 turned her head and said seriously, "It seems that Master will be able to bring us to the illusory God Palace soon." Aunt 12 was very happy. Her lips curled into a sweet smile as she said softly, "Yes." Although their voices were not loud, the people around them could still hear them. Xiao Ran's neck stiffened as he looked at them with a complicated expression. A few seconds ago he might have laughed at these two girls for speaking nonsense, but now, he actually felt that it was not impossible. He had stayed in the illusory God Palace for too long and had seen many geniuses. There were also many who had tried to complete the Star Road. But none of them had succeeded. At first, he thought that Mu Yafeng had suddenly become enlightened and had a chance to succeed. But in the end it turned out that she had cheated. Not only did she lose, but she also implicated the seventh divine envoy. She was quite powerful. But Chu Liyue's current state was obviously different from Mu Yafeng. These Xian formations she did not hesitate at all. With just a glance she was able to solve them smoothly and smoothly. It was as if she had a card up her sleeve. Thinking of this, he suddenly remembered something and walked a few steps to the side to stand beside Jue. "Master Jue." Mingshu was concentrating on watching Chu Liyue solve the Xian formation. When he heard this he suddenly quivered. Xiao Ran? What's wrong?" Xiao Ran lowered his voice and asked. "Nothing, I just have something to ask Master Mingshu." He raised his chin. "I saw that Master Mingshu accompanied you here before? Did you just come out of Zhenbao Pavilion?" He knew that Chu Liyue had been in Zhenbao Pavilion recently. Mingshu nodded, "Yes." Then Xiao Ran thought for a while and asked, "That Xian formation, how's her copying?" Seeing that this heaven illumination illusory formation could not trap her, it was obvious that she had solved it before. If he guessed correctly, Chu Liyue might have already copied the corresponding profound formation. Mingshu's expression became a little strange. The entire mythical flame diagram had been copied. What could he say? Seeing Jue's expression, Xiao Ran was at a loss. Although this matter should not be publicized at this time, there was nothing that could not be said, right? Furthermore, everyone knew that he, Xiao Ran, was only left with the last profound formation that he had yet to decipher. This matter would not affect his interests. Mingshu hesitated for a long time before he finally said, "Just watch." Xiao Ran blinked, then suddenly realized something. What he meant by that, the profound formations that Chu Liyue had deciphered had all been copied. Bang. At this moment, Chu Liyue had successfully deciphered the second profound formation that started with the word, heaven. The resplendent light was still gradually blooming above her head, but her expression was calm. Without hesitation she stepped forward and took a step forward. Continue. This commotion was really too big. Soon, everyone in the illusory God Palace knew about it. Many people went to see it for themselves. In the sky, figures flashed by, all of them heading toward the Star Road. Not far from the illusory God Palace's entrance, Mu Yafeng was kneeling alone. Her legs were completely numb and she could barely feel anything. Hearing the sound, she subconsciously looked up. At first, she did not pay much attention to it, but when she realized that the profound formations were being deciphered at an astonishing speed, she realized that something was wrong. She did not need to look or guess. Almost instantly, she knew who was the one who had caused such a huge commotion. Mu Yafeng knew all the Grandmaster-level Shen masters in the illusory God Palace. Other than Chu Liwei, who else could it be? As streaks of flowing light soared into the sky and transformed into profound formations in midair, Mu Yafeng's attitude gradually changed from being a bystander to shock and disbelief. She looked in the direction of the Star Road in shock, almost suspecting that she had seen wrongly. How could there be someone who could decipher so many profound formations in such a short time? He was even faster than her back then. Even if Chu Liwei had the mythical flame diagram, it shouldn't be like this. When Chu Liwei used the heaven-swapping reflection illusory formation, Mu Yafeng became even more emotional and fainted. Bah! She fell to the ground with a dull thud. Not far away, Ruan Jianfeng, who was standing at the end of the Star Road, heard the sound and glanced over. His face was cold and expressionless, and he quickly retracted his gaze. At the same time, everyone in the illusory God Palace was also alarmed. "It's IU." Dumpling was walking when she suddenly sensed a familiar aura and shouted in surprise. Without thinking, she walked toward the illusory God Palace's entrance with her short legs. But before she could take 2 steps, she was stopped by Yu Qian. "You can't go." Dumpling looked up and saw Yu Qian's unquestionable expression. She knew it wouldn't be easy to win. Yu Qian thought that Dumpling would make a fuss, but unexpectedly she nodded. "I won't go." Just as Yu Qian found it strange, Dumpling put her hands on her waist and snorted. "I'll just wait here for IU to come in." She couldn't go out, so wouldn't it be fine as long as IU came in? Chapter 2360. Yu Qian sneered. "You seem to have a lot of confidence in her." In all these years, Jin Yunlai was the only person in the Illusion God Palace who had relied on her own strength to complete the Star Passage and enter the Palace of the Illusion God. This alone was enough to show how difficult this matter was. Now, Chu Liwei had only been here for a few months. How could she do it? Dumpling snorted softly. "Because IU is very powerful. Others might not be able to do it, but she definitely could." Bah! Another sound was heard. Yu Qian turned around to take a look and frowned slightly. This speed was indeed a little fast, Second Oracle. At this moment, a voice was heard. Yu Qian looked at the person who had come. "Yunlai, why are you here?" Jin Yunlai's face was a little haggard. It seemed that she had suffered some setbacks recently. The corners of his lips moved. "I was just a little curious about the situation on the Star Passage, so I wanted to take a look." He originally wanted to go out and take a look, but considering that his reputation had been ruined recently, it was inevitable that he would be criticized by many people if he went out, so he gave up the idea. He didn't expect to meet Yu Qian and Dumpling here. His gaze lingered on Dumpling for a moment. Shouldn't she be at Fengming Mountain at this time? Why was she in the Palace of the Illusion God? But seeing that Yu Qian was accompanying her, he didn't ask any more questions. Dumpling ignored his gaze and found a step to sit down. She rested her chin on her hands and waited patiently. Yu Qian looked at Jin Yunlai, thought for a moment, and asked, "What do you think about the situation in Shangguanyu this time?" Jin Yunlai was the one who had the most right to speak about this. Jin Yunlai hesitated for a moment. "I can only say that she solved the Great Grandmaster faster than me." Yu Qian's expression froze. When Dumpling said that Chu Liwei would definitely be able to enter, he did not take it to heart. But if these words came out of Jin Yunlai's mouth, they had to believe it. "So you're saying that she can really break through all the profound formations this time?" Jin Yunlai was silent for a moment before she nodded. Ever since Chu Liwei started walking the star path, he had been secretly observing him. Therefore he had long expected this day to come. He just didn't expect that this day would come so quickly. "Looks like the precious treasure pavilion really helped her a lot," Yu Qian muttered. Jin Yunlai knew that he was talking about how Chu Liwei had been invited by the precious treasures pavilion to copy Shen formations. After all, this was equivalent to giving her the mythical flame diagram. But, even if many people obtained the mythical flame diagram, they still couldn't understand it. Chu Liwei was able to succeed mainly because she was talented enough. Even, he could faintly feel a trace of threat. Jin Yunlai's lips moved, but she still swallowed her words. At this point there was no point in saying these things. However, even if she can finish walking the star path and break through every profound formation, she still can't enter the illusory God Palace. Yu Qian stood with his hands behind his back and said lightly. Dumpling looked up and glared at him. Yu Qian laughed, but there was no smile in his eyes. People without a bloodline totem will eventually be stopped outside. This was different from those refining saints. Even if the refining saints themselves did not have a bloodline totem, if they could refine a sacred weapon, it meant that they had taken an aura from the chaos divine jade. Relying on that aura, they could also enter the illusory god palace. Suli was like that. But for Chu Luiyue to enter as a Xian master, it was impossible. Time passed slowly. Chu Luiyue walked forward step by step. At this point, the remaining profound formations on the star path all started with the word heaven. In the eyes of others, this part was the most complicated and difficult. But to Chu Luiyue, it was just displaying the profound formations imprinted in the depths of her mind. Her divine power reserves were extremely abundant, especially after she had found the third zither score. And the most important thing was that after she started to display the heaven profound formation, not only did her mental power and strength not suffer a huge loss, but it seemed to be constantly improving. In the beginning she didn't really realize this, but as she unleashed more and more profound formations, everything gradually became clear. The surrounding people looked at this scene and were all speechless. Many people felt bitter in their mouths. When they looked at each other, they could only see the deep powerlessness and despair in each other's eyes. When someone was just a little bit better than you, you might be envious and jealous, but when this person was much better than you would not even have the thought of comparing. Now they felt this way towards Chu Luiyue. It was an indisputable fact that she could finish walking the star path. Rays of light shot into the sky and bloomed in midair. Chu Luiyue walked forward step by step. After an unknown period of time, she finally reached the end of the star path. She stopped and looked forward. In front of her, there was one last profound formation. If she continued forward, it would be the gate of the illusory god palace. And Ruan Jianfeng was standing there. He stared at Chu Luiyue with a sharp gaze as if he wanted to see through her. Unfortunately, the woman in front of him was beautiful and smiling. Her eyes were deep and calm like the starry night, and it was impossible to see any emotion in them. "You do have some ability," he said. Even though he was not a Shen master, he knew how difficult it was to finish this star path. Now, as long as she could decipher the last Shen formation, it would be considered complete. Chu Luiyue smiled. "Thank you for the praise, fifth divine envoy." Ruan Jianfeng's gaze moved down and landed on the Tuan Xnz tied to her waist. "Unfortunately, even if you crack the last profound formation, you still can't enter the illusory god palace." Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. "It won't be too late for fifth divine envoy to say this when I'm really rejected." Ruan Jianfeng took a step back. He wanted to see where Chu Luiyue's confidence came from. Chu Luiyue shrugged and lowered her head to play with the Tuan Xnz. Because of this thing, she had been looked down upon and ridiculed in the illusory god palace. However, it didn't matter. As long as one's fist was strong enough, everyone would learn to shut up. She turned her gaze and looked at the last profound formation. Unlike other Xian formations, this Xian formation surface area was obviously much larger, and its patterns were also much more complicated. Ordinary people would find it hard to take a few more glances, let alone crack it. Chu Luiyue lifted her sleeves and sat down cleanly. Everyone looked at each other when they saw this. "Is she planning to waste time?" someone asked in a low voice. "I've heard that even the seventh divine emissary took a total of 10 years to activate the final Xian formation. I wonder, how long will she take this time?" 10 years is considered short. Have you forgotten that Xiao Ran has been trapped here for over 10,000 years? But Shangguan Yu's performance isn't much worse than the seventh divine envoy's, right? I guess. Look, she's starting. Chapter 2361. Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged, held her breath and raised her palm. Her slender and fair fingertips seemed to dance lightly, and a stream of light instantly flew out. In the next moment, the stream of light transformed into a huge ring in front of her. From afar it was dazzling. She's actually going to start from the outline of the Xian formation? The more complicated the Xian formation, the more it should start from the middle, right? That Xian formation is so complicated. She should first fix the framework, then draw the outline bit by bit. If there's even the slightest mistake, she will lose everything. I really don't know what she's thinking. Because of Chu Luiyue's actions, many people fell into shock and confusion. Xiao Ran also furrowed his brows. If she did this, wouldn't it be even more troublesome? Chu Luiyue ignored them. With a light wave of her other hand, several streams of light flew out and entered the ring. She didn't stop moving, and the outline of the void was quickly filled up. Throughout the entire process, she didn't pause at all, as if she had already memorized every detail of the Xian formation. In fact, it was indeed so. As Xiaoran watched, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. His gaze focused, and he began to carefully observe every movement of Chu Liyue's hands. This seemed different from what he had understood before. His heart suddenly started beating faster. If Chu Liyue was right, then he seemed to know why he was trapped in the last Shen formation for so long. Thinking of this, Xiaoran unconsciously walked forward. Jie quickly pulled him back. "Hey Xiaoran, you can't go any further." The position they were standing at was already the closest to the front. If they wanted to continue forward, they had to walk the Star Road. Xiaoran stopped in his tracks, but his gaze still didn't move away from Chu Liyue. To be precise, it was the Xian formation in front of her. Jie looked at him strangely. "Xiaoran, what's wrong with you?" "Nothing." Xiaoran muttered, his eyes shining. "I might have to follow this girl into the illusory god palace." Jie? So sudden? He couldn't enter for tens of thousands of years, but now, he suddenly thought of something and quickly turned to look at Chu Liyue. Could it be? Xiaoran learned something from Chu Liyue? She's breaking the last Xian formation. In the illusory god palace, Jin Yunlai spoke softly with a complicated expression. Yu Qian was expressionless. In his opinion, even if Chu Liyue, she still wouldn't be able to enter the illusory god palace. So what was there to be concerned? Jin Yunlai knew what he was thinking and sighed to himself. At first he thought he was, but now he was. He had never seen anyone who could break through all the Shen formations in such a short period of time. And was of it. Just now he felt that something was wrong. Now he was even more certain that Chu Liyue's situation was different from the others. Previously, after Mu Yafeng broke 7 Grandmaster Shen formations in a row on the Star Passage, she stopped because of the huge consumption of strength and spirit. She rested on the spot for a while before continuing. But later on he could clearly feel her exhaustion and her lack of strength. Even though he had taught her a lot at that time, it was still the same. But Chu Liyue, she seemed to be like a fish in water on this Star Passage. He had never seen such a person. Therefore, no one could say for sure what unexpected things would happen next. The Xian formation in front of Chu Liyue was filled up bit by bit. Countless lines intertwined and were very delicate, but she didn't make any mistakes. Every step was precise. Even Mingshu, who had long known that Chu Liyue had finished copying the mythical flame diagram, was so shocked that he was speechless. Because the mythical flame diagram didn't have this last Xian formation. But looking at her, it was as if she had already drawn it thousands of times. Xiaoran's eyes lit up. In his mind, it was as if a door that had been closed for a long time was suddenly opened. Following Chu Liyue's movements, he also carried out the same simulation in his mind. Although it wasn't as smooth as Chu Liyue's, it still went smoothly in the end. Xiaoran's blood seemed to be boiling. No one had been trapped by this Shen formation for a longer time than him, so he could react faster than the others to what Chu Liyue was doing. Sure enough, his method of breaking this Shen formation was wrong from the beginning. If he chose the wrong direction from the beginning, how could he reach the destination? The waiting time seemed to be especially unbearable. But to Chu Liyue, everything seemed to pass in a flash. She ignored everything around her. Only this Xian formation was left in her eyes. The pattern was gradually drawn, delicate and accurate. Chu Liyue seemed to have entered a subtle state. She didn't even need to look. With a raise of her hand, those flowing lights would automatically go to their original positions. No one would believe that this Xian formation was the easiest one for her. Everything was as natural as nature itself. Finally, at a certain moment, Chu Liyue's hand touched the center. Buzz. In an instant, the Xian formation shone brightly. Countless Xian formations lit up in succession on the entire Star Passage. It was like a galaxy in the dark night, incomparably bright. Chapter 2362. The sky was filled with sparkling stars. It was so bright that it was hard to look at it directly. Many people on both sides of the Star Road subconsciously raised their hands to cover their eyes, but they couldn't bear to really block their line of sight for fear of missing something. Although they had already expected this outcome, it was still inconceivable when it actually happened. Star Road, in the long thousands of years, other than the 7th divine envoy Jin Yunlai, she was the only one who had walked all the way from the Heaven Gate to the illusory God Palace and cracked all the Shen formations. Furthermore, he had accomplished all of this in such a short period of time. After a short silence, little Hachi was the first to react. Her beautiful eyes sparkled as she screamed, "Ah, I knew it! I knew Master was the best." Her cheeks were faintly red due to her excitement, which made her enchanting and charming face even more moving. She pinched the cheeks of the two girls beside her. "Quick, tell me, wasn't Master the best?" Aunt 11's lips curled into a smile. "Of course." Aunt 12's face flushed red. She clenched her small fist and waved it around. Finally she squeezed out a sentence, "Master is the best." Little Hachi was satisfied. Her face was filled with joy and she couldn't hide it. Of course she didn't plan to hide it. Wu Yao looked at the three of them from the side and shook his head helplessly. However, his eyes were filled with excitement. He had heard many rumors about the illusory god palace and knew that the Star Road was very difficult. Not to mention them, even the so-called geniuses in the illusory god palace couldn't succeed. But now Master had really done it. Naturally he was proud of it. I know. A white light flashed through Xiaoran's mind. He was so excited that he was almost incoherent. He grabbed Zhui beside him. "That's it. So that's it." Ever since Chu Luiyue started to crack the last Shen formation, he faintly realized where his problem was. With the completion of the Shen formation, the entire Star Road was lit up by her, and he finally understood. Zhui was still immersed in shock. After being pulled by Xiaoran, he suddenly felt dizzy. Xiaoran took a deep breath. "I know how to break the final Shen formation." Mingshu was dumbfounded. Don't tell me it's because, did he have an epiphany after seeing Madame's actions just now?" Xiaoran nodded. "Yes." He loosened his grip and was about to go forward, but then he thought better of it and stopped. "Let's wait until she finishes her business here and enters the illusory god palace." Although he knew the way to break it, it would still be quite difficult for him to actually implement it. In any case, it was impossible for him to be faster than Chu Luiyue. It was very likely that he would have to spend a lot of time. But, in the end, there was still hope to take this step. He was completely dumbfounded. What was going on? Not only did Madame decipher all the Shen formations on the Star Passage, she even enlightened Xiaoran? His expression became even more subtle. At this moment, he finally realized that the Madame's strength seemed to be even more shocking than he had expected. Gradually, the onlookers also came back to their senses. They looked at Chu Luiyue with very complicated expressions. Shock, disbelief, envy, admiration. At this point, any words would be pale and powerless. Anything they said would seem sour and useless. She had completed the Star Passage with her own strength. There was nothing they could do about it. At this moment, the doubts and ridicule they had for her before had become a loud slap to their own faces. It was a burning pain. Chu Luiyue raised her eyes and looked at the Shen formation that was rotating silently in front of her. She gently exhaled. Finally, she didn't let him down. Wang Jianfeng frowned. He thought that Chu Luiyue would be trapped in the final Shen formation. Even if she could break it, it would take several years. Who knew? All of this was indeed outside of his expectations. Fifth Divine Envoy. Chu Luiyue tilted her head, and her lips curved up slightly. "Now, can I enter the illusory god palace?" Wang Jianfeng paused and nodded. "As long as you can open the door of the illusory god palace, it will be considered a success." Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. It seemed that the door wasn't that easy to open. She lowered her eyes and glanced at Tuan X and Z tied to her waist, then her lips curved into a smile. "Okay." After saying that, she took a step forward. In an instant, the Shen formation floating in the air turned into countless streams of light and entered the Star Passage. Chu Luiyue came to the door, raised her head slightly and looked over. Coincidentally, she had seen this door before. Although it was just an illusion at that time, it had left a deep impression on her. At this moment, standing in front of the real thing, the familiar and strange feeling came again. Everything was so real. Even the marks on the door that had been eroded by the wind and frost of time, and the heavy and vast pressure, it was right in front of her eyes and within reach. Chu Luiyue reached out her hand. Her slender and soft palm gently placed on the door. Buzz. Almost at the instant her hand touched the door, a buzzing sound suddenly rang out. The hearts of the onlookers hung in the air. Those without a bloodline totem would encounter obstacles when trying to enter the illusory god palace. It seemed that Chu Luiyue was also the same. A pattern suddenly appeared under Chu Luiyue's palm. Chu Luiyue looked at it. There seemed to be a pattern that gradually appeared on the door. Ayu is coming in. Seeing that the last Shen formation was successfully broken, Dumpling jumped up with joy and excitement. Yu Qian frowned. Jin Yunlai's hand slowly clenched. At this moment, everyone in the illusory god palace heard the noise and looked towards the door. Nan Jinshu hurriedly walked out and happened to meet Su Li at the corner. Nan family head, what a coincidence. Su Li smiled warmly and gently. You also know that little Yu just finished walking the star passage and is coming in, right? Nan Jinshu choked. Actually, he already knew what was happening outside. At first, he didn't take it to heart, but as Chu Luiyue broke more and more Xian formations, he gradually panicked. Until just now, when Chu Luiyue successfully executed the last Xian formation, he finally couldn't sit still anymore. Thus, he hurriedly came out and wanted to check it out. Who knew that he would run into Su Li? He forced a smile and said, Mr. Su, you're joking. She's not a weapon refining saint and doesn't have a bloodline totem, so she can't come in. I just feel that it's a pity. Is that so? Su Li laughed and tilted her head towards the door. Then I'm afraid that Nan family head will be disappointed. What? Nan Jinshu was stunned. Su Li raised her chin. The door is open. Chapter 2363. Nan Jinshu turned his head instinctively. He could see the situation at the door from where he was standing. Yu Qian and Jin Yunlai were standing in front of the Chaos Holy Jade looking at the door. Dumpling was there too. If it weren't for the two of them watching, she would have already rushed over to him. Creak, the sound of the door turning could be heard clearly. The door to the Illusion God Palace was pushed open a crack. Nan Jinshu's eyes widened in shock. At this moment, a gust of wind blew. Woo woo, an indescribable pressure came from all directions, completely enveloping Chu Luiyue as if it was going to crush her into pieces. A gust of wind swept over, lifting her fine black hair and making the corners of her dress dance. A few strands of hair covered her eyes. Sensing the biting cold aura that rushed out from the crack in the door, many people looked at each other in dismay. As expected, it was extremely difficult for someone without a bloodline totem to completely open the door. Some people were already shaking their heads. With this situation, Chu Luiyue probably couldn't get in. Inside the door, the crack didn't expand. Everything seemed to have stopped. Nan Jinshu's emotions were in turmoil. He swallowed his saliva with difficulty. His mouth was dry, but in the end he forced a sneer. I don't think so. The door is open, but she has to be able to get in first. Based on the current situation, being able to open the door a crack was already her limit. Su Li's lips curved without a smile. She didn't reply and walked towards the door. Dumpling turned around when she heard the sound. She ran over immediately when she saw Su Li. Mr. Su. Su Li smiled and bent down to pick her up. Mr. Su, you're also here to wait for Ayu, right? Dumpling asked. Su Li smiled gently. Yes. Yu Qian's gaze paused on Su Li for a moment before he looked away. His lips curved into a cold smile. These people seemed to have almost blind confidence in Chu Luiyue. He had to admit that for Chu Luiyue to be able to complete the Star Road in such a short time, he did have some ability. But what kind of place was the illusory shrine? She wanted to come in, but that was just a fool's dream. Of course, Su Li could see Yu Qian's disdain. But she didn't care. She just smiled and looked at the door quietly with Dumpling in her arms. Chu Luiyue had said that she wanted to enter the illusory God Palace. Then today, she would definitely be able to enter. If she wanted to do something, then she would definitely succeed. The biting cold pressure came with the wind, and the flesh, tendons and bones all over his body felt like they were about to be torn apart. Intense pain came from every part of his body. Chu Luiyue's hands trembled slightly. The tongue tied to his waist also swayed in the wind. No one noticed that the words on it had already become incomparably thick without a sound. Chu Luiyue closed his eyes. The sound of a zither suddenly sounded from within her body. Clang. The sound of the zither was bleak, but it contained a powerful aura that pressed forward courageously, sweeping across. At this moment, the pressure that had enveloped her vanished with a loud rumble. She didn't hesitate and suddenly pushed. Bang! The door of the illusory shrine opened. In an instant, the wind and clouds surged. Yu Qian suddenly realized that something was wrong and quickly turned around to take a look. The scene in front of him made his heart sink fiercely. Above the Chaos Holy Jade, sparkling radiance gathered. The scarlet gold flames burning on the top of the surrounding white jade pillars suddenly shook violently. They were like candles in the wind, on the verge of collapse. How could this be? He seemed to have suddenly thought of something and looked in the direction of the door again. At the open door, a slender and exquisite figure was standing quietly. Her shoulders and back were extremely straight, like a pine tree in the wind, outstanding and unyielding. On her incomparably beautiful face, the pair of eyes that were as deep as the abyss and as bright as the night sky were shining with a bright light. Behind her, the thousands of lights on the star road flickered and bloomed passionately, but they were not as dazzling as her. Meeting those eyes, for a moment, Yu Qian's heart suddenly gave birth to an extremely strange feeling. It wasn't the first time he saw Chu Luiyue, but it seemed to be the first time he saw her like this. Cold, arrogant, lonely, indifferent, noble and high above everyone else. She seemed to be looking over here but also seemed to be looking through all of this, into the vast and boundless distance. Yu Qian opened his mouth wanting to say something, but found that at this moment he couldn't utter a single word. Then he saw the woman take a step forward, and officially stepped into the illusory shrine. Lightning pool. Under the frozen lightning pool, countless silver and golden tianlei seemed to be frozen, motionless in place. At a certain moment the wind suddenly rose and a golden tianlei slowly swam up. Pull one to move the whole body. The heavenly lightning in the surroundings also began to stir. Seeing this, Shijing, who was standing on the shore, suddenly showed some surprise. Logically speaking, the tianlei here shouldn't have recovered yet, right? Then he suddenly realized something, and turned his head to look in the direction of the illusory shrine. Could it be Qi? More and more tianlei began to stir. From afar it looked like a dusty chess game that had been sealed for a long time. Suddenly someone took the chess piece and wanted to change the situation. Whoosh! A figure suddenly flew out from the depths of the lightning pool. It was the fourth divine emissary in charge of guarding here, Mu Dongyu. He was originally peacefully guarding the lightning pool, but when he heard the commotion he immediately moved. He stood in the air and looked down. When he saw the tianlei begin to stir, he immediately frowned. This movement seemed to be unusual. Seeing Mu Dongyu come, Shijing slowly tightened his grip on the hammer in his hand. Crackle. A few streaks of light flashed past his hammer, making subtle noises. Then, the tianlei that were about to stir quietly quieted down. It was as if an invisible hand had tipped down and covered all the waves. All of these changes happened in the blink of an eye. Just as Mu Dongyu was hesitating whether to report to the illusory shrine, he found that the movement below had disappeared. He frowned and then looked at Shijing, who was standing on the shore. Chapter 2364. Almost at the same time that he looked over, Shijing also looked over. There was quite a distance between the two, but they could still see each other's expressions. Shijing grinned. Fourth emissary, why are you looking at me like that? Mu Dongyu stared at him for a long time before retracting her gaze. But he was just a god. He thought too much. Worried that something else would happen here, Mu Dongyu didn't leave. Shijing shrugged, weighed the thunder hammer in his hand and suddenly smiled. The main hall of the palace of the illusory god. Jun Jiuqing knelt in the middle with his eyes closed. His body was covered in a layer of red light, and his aura kept rising. At a certain moment the buzzing sound finally came. He opened his eyes. In the circular hall, on the surrounding walls, dots of starlight gradually lit up and flickered. He said softly, "Finally it's here." His voice was emotionless and his face was slightly lowered. His face was hidden in the faint shadow and couldn't be seen clearly. After a moment he finally got up and walked outside. In the quiet courtyard, the piled-up leaves suddenly flew up. A sound came from the door as if someone was preparing to open it. But in an instant the sound came to an abrupt stop. The courtyard that was silent to the point of desolation once again fell into a deathly silence. When the last Xian formation was drawn, Rong Xiu had already walked out of the room. He stood on the steps with his hands behind his back, and looked in the direction of the palace of the illusory god. There was a deep look in his eyes. Then he closed his eyes. The wind gradually stopped. In the palace of the illusory god, the light on the chaos holy jade gradually dissipated. The golden flames burning on the top of the white jade pillars also calmed down and burned quietly. It was as if everything that happened before was just an illusion. All of the restless changes quietly dissipated, but Yu Qian's brows furrowed even tighter. For some reason he felt that something was wrong. All the movements seemed to be related to Chu Luiyue. He looked at Chu Luiyue with a sharp gaze, as if he wanted to see through her from the inside out. Chu Luiyue ignored his scrutiny. She just stared straight ahead. The majestic palace was magnificent, noble and sacred. Even though he had seen it once in the Crimson Moon Desert, that was only an illusion after all. It was far from being as real as seeing it with his own eyes and experiencing it personally. She took a deep breath and continued walking. "You." Tuanzi directly jumped out of Su Li's arms and ran over with her little feet. Chu Liyue's lips curled into a smile. He bent over and scooped up Dumpling. It was a soft ball with a hint of sweetness. Indeed, it had been a long time since they last met. Chu Luiyue kissed the girl's chubby cheeks. Dumpling hugged her neck and giggled, rubbing its head against her shoulder. I knew you would definitely be able to come in. Chu Luiyue finally remembered something. By the way, why are you here? Shouldn't Dumpling be at Fengming Mountain? Dumpling's big black grape-like eyes rolled around as she said in a childish voice, because it's boring to stay alone in Fengming Mountain. So I ran over myself. I was planning to walk around and see if there was anything fun, but I just happened to bump into Ayu. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly. Dumpling obviously had other reasons for coming to the illusory god palace. But this reason didn't seem to be known by others. She pinched Dumpling's nose. If I had known that our Dumpling was here, I would have definitely come in earlier. Everyone, isn't this fast? Yu Qian raised his eyes slightly and looked outside the door. He said coldly, Jianfeng closed the door. Ruan Jianfeng was still shocked that Chu Luiyue had actually entered the illusory god palace. Hearing this, he finally came back to his senses. Yes. He walked in and closed the door again, blocking the countless gazes outside. However, when he looked at Chu Luiyue again, his expression was extremely complicated. A quarter of an hour ago, he was still certain that Chu Luiyue would definitely not be able to enter. But now, as the door of the illusory god palace closed again, the spectators standing on both sides of the Star Road were stunned for a moment before they burst into an uproar. Shengguan, you really went in? Didn't she not have a bloodline totem? And just now, the illusory god palace did indeed have the intention to reject her. How come in the blink of an eye? Speaking of which, don't you guys feel that something was wrong just now? At this moment, another person stood on the Star Road. Was Xiaoran. He didn't care about the various discussions around him. He only rubbed his palms and looked at the last Shen formation on the Star Road with shining eyes. For this step, he had wasted tens of thousands of years, and even he himself was about to give up. Who knew that there would be a twist? After seeing Chu Luiyue draw the Shen formation with his own eyes, he finally found a way to break it. Swish! A stream of light flew out from his hand and quickly condensed into a ring. He seriously recalled what he saw just now in his mind. He sighed in his heart and was even filled with admiration for Chu Luiyue. She could actually think of such a method, and so naturally too, he muttered softly. If I didn't know that she's not even 20 years old, I would have suspected that she personally created this Shen formation. At this point, he couldn't help but laugh and shake his head. Chapter 2365. Yu Qian stared at Chu Luiyue. He kept recalling the scene when she stepped into the palace of the illusory god and frowned. There were too many suspicious points about her. Until now he still didn't know how she came in. His gaze fell on the Tuan XNZ at her waist. It swayed with the wind, light and neat. There didn't seem to be anything unusual. Chu Luiyue followed his line of sight, lowered her head and smiled. Second messenger, why are you looking at me like that? Indeed, this ball of tongue had almost exploded the moment she entered the room. But there was an invisible and powerful force that calmed it down. Unfortunately, that force disappeared quickly and she didn't have time to feel it. Yu Qian said indifferently. You're the first person to come in without a bloodline totem. Chu Luiyue looked at Su Li. Didn't Mr. Su come in too? She's a weapon refining saint. Naturally she's different. In addition, you're the second person to come in from the Star Road. Of course, he had to pay more attention to such a person. Chu Luiyue looked calm and let him size her up. She came in openly through the door. Could it be that these people could chase her out? Su Li walked over with a smile on her face. Little you, congratulations. She knew that she could do it. Chu Luiyue also laughed. I said that I wouldn't let Mr. Su wait here for too long. After coming in, many things were convenient. For example, investigating the whereabouts of Debao and Lan Xiao. But now was obviously not the time. Chu Luiyue looked around. It was exactly the same as the scene in the Red Moon Desert. However, there was one difference. The palace of the illusory god wasn't covered by the white fog, so she could see more clearly. Finally, her gaze fell on the main hall in front of her. That should be the main hall of the palace of the illusory god. From the corner of her eyes, a figure came into view. Chu Luiyue tilted her head to take a look and instantly smiled. Master Nan, long time no see. How have you been? Nan Jinshu, who was about to leave quietly, suddenly froze. He turned around awkwardly with a very interesting expression on his face. You, Master Yu, what did you call her? Before Chu Luiyue could say anything, the second messenger suddenly spoke. His eyes seemed to be covered in a layer of frost with a bone-chilling coldness. Nan Jinshu was shocked, and Chu Luiyue raised her brows in confusion. Why did it seem like he didn't like it? But this didn't seem to have anything to do with him? Nan Jinshu swallowed his saliva nervously and replied, yes. Yu's name. Master uses you, this second messenger he called you was you. After all, when Chu Luiyue took over the Peach Blossom Dock in the world of God, that was how everyone addressed her. The Nan family suffered heavy casualties in the Battle of the Peach Blossom Dock. For a long time, Nan Jinshu was traumatized by Chu Luiyue. Even here, logically speaking, he should be more confident than Chu Luiyue. But this woman had a lot of trump cards. Every time he thought she was going to die, she would still be able to fight her way out and make everyone look at her in a different light. Just like now. He didn't expect her to be able to come in. In a moment of nervousness, he called her that. Yu Qian's expression turned even colder. Don't call her that again. If I hear it a second time. Yes. Before he could finish, Nan Jinshu had already sensed the severity of the situation and hurriedly responded. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. This was really strange. Wasn't it just calling her Master Yu? It didn't seem like a big deal. Why did Yu Qian care so much? He was the second divine envoy. Logically speaking, he shouldn't care about such a small matter. It was meaningless and unstylish. But looking at his reaction, she lowered her eyes to hide the ripples in her eyes. When she looked up again, her expression had returned to normal. Patriarch Nan, since the second divine envoy said so, you really have to be more careful in the future. Don't cause any trouble for yourself because of me. Nan Jinshu's face turned pale. You. Patriarch Nan, you said you would wait for me in the palace of the illusory god. Now that I see you, Patriarch Nan, you really keep your word. Chu Luiyue smiled. I'm new here, so I don't know much about the palace of the illusory god. I'll have to trouble Patriarch Nan in the future. Nan Jinshu's legs turned to jelly as he complained in his heart. Trouble? Chu Luiyue was already good at fighting in the past. Now that he had comprehended all the Shen formations in the Star Passage, he could be considered a top grandmaster. His combat strength was almost unimaginable. If the two of them really fought, he wouldn't even know how he died. Nan Jinshu forced a smile. I wouldn't dare. He couldn't wait to avoid Chu Luiyue in the future. If he knew this would happen, he would have just stayed in his own residence. Why did he have to come here? Patriarch Nan and I are old acquaintances. There's no need to be so polite. Chu Luiyue smiled and said sincerely. Nan Jinshu couldn't wait to run away. It seems like you have some misunderstanding. Yu Qian looked at Chu Luiyue and said, entering the palace of the illusory god through the Star Passage only means that you have the right to enter the palace of the illusory god in the future. It doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want here. There are many places in the palace of the illusory god that you can't go to. Do you understand? Chu Luiyue blinked. I don't really understand. Second divine envoy, please tell me what those places are. I don't want to offend you in the future. Yu Qian's face was cold. He really didn't want to talk to Chu Luiyue, but the current situation. The main hall of the palace of the illusory god is where the divine envoys live. Chu Luiyue nodded. I see, Yu Qian continued. Since you've already entered the palace of the illusory god, I won't say anything else. Once you're here, just focus on your cultivation. Half a year later, those who can't reach the immortal state will be kicked out of the palace of the illusory god. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows. The qi of heaven and earth here was indeed rich and pure, which was very helpful for cultivation. For most cultivators, the biggest benefit of entering the palace of the illusory god was to increase their chances of reaching the immortal state. Only those who succeeded could continue to stay here. And those who failed would still be kicked out. The survival of the fittest, was the most obvious and cruel rule here. Thank you, second divine envoy. Chu Luiyue nodded. Yu Qian's eyes fell on Dumpling. Well, you should go back now. Tuanzi pouted unhappily and hugged Chu Luiyue's neck, refusing to let go. Yu Qian's eyes were cold. Chu Luiyue patted Dumpling gently. Anyway, I will be here in the future. Tuanzi, you can come whenever you want. Chapter 2367. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. In the palace of the illusory god, other than the main hall, there were many courtyards. The height of these courtyards was basically the same. In other words, standing here, it was impossible to see the situation inside. But she had just asked such a question. Most importantly, even in the illusion of the Red Moon Desert, she had not been to any other place besides the main hall. In other words, she really should not have known that there was another courtyard in the innermost area. Su Li glanced at Chu Luiyue and immediately smiled. Oh, about this, I had accidentally mentioned it to little Yu before. Fifth Divine Envoy, you wouldn't mind, right? Ruan Jianfeng glanced at Su Li. Su Li's lips slightly pursed and her eyes were clear. She seemed to be a little nervous. I didn't know where it was at that time. I just casually mentioned it. Ruan Jianfeng retracted his gaze and coldly said, that is the residence of the first divine envoy. Without permission, no one is allowed to go near it. If anyone dares to violate it, they will die. Chu Liyue's eyes narrowed. The residence of the first divine envoy? She once again looked in that direction. Although she could not see anything through the eaves and walls, her heart was still shrouded in an extremely subtle feeling. Why did she say those words just now? After one glance, Chu Liyue retracted her gaze and looked down slightly. Thank you for your reminder, fifth divine envoy. Seeing that she was indeed curious and did not have any other intentions, Ruan Jianfeng finally let this matter pass. After walking for another quarter of an hour, he brought Chu Liyue and Su Li to a courtyard. From today onwards you will be living here. Other than the few places that the second divine envoy mentioned, it's best that you don't casually walk around the entire palace of the illusory god. Otherwise you won't even know when you get into trouble. Ruan Jianfeng's voice was as cold as ever. If you cause any trouble, no one will help you. Originally, Chu Liyue came from the star path. The seventh divine envoy Jinyun Lai should have been half her backer. At the very least, she should have been biased towards her. Unfortunately, it was already not easy for him to protect himself. What else could he talk about? Moreover, because he didn't have a bloodline totem, his attitude towards Chu Liyue had been very cold. But now Chu Liyue had relied on his own ability to get in. This was undoubtedly a slap to Jinyun Lai's face. When he saw Chu Liyue, he wasn't in a good mood either. Therefore, although Chu Liyue had entered the illusory god palace, his situation was not optimistic. However, Chu Liyue didn't care. She smiled. I know. Ruan Jianfeng didn't stay for too long. He left after giving out the necessary instructions. This time, only Chu Liyue and Su Li were left at the door. Chu Liyue watched Ruan Jianfeng's figure disappear before saying, Mr. Su, let's talk inside. After entering the courtyard, Chu Liyue quickly looked around. This place wasn't big and the furnishings were very simple. It was just an ordinary small courtyard and it seemed that no one had lived here for a long time. Fortunately, it was clean. Chu Liyue and Su Li entered the house. Just as they closed the door, Su Li couldn't help but ask. Little Yu, what happened just now? Why did you suddenly ask about the first divine envoy's residence? Chu Liyue helplessly laughed bitterly. Mr. Su, I really don't know where it is. If I knew, I wouldn't have asked that question. Who didn't know that the first divine envoy had a special identity? Even the other divine envoys didn't dare to offend him. Why would she be so stubborn as to touch this bad luck? Su Li thought about it and agreed. But why did you suddenly ask me that question? I remember that I didn't mention this to you before? Chu Liyue tapped her finger on the armrest and thought for a moment before saying, This. If I say that I don't know, would Mr. Su believe me? Su Li was startled. What do you mean? Chu Liyue rubbed her forehead. It was really troublesome to explain this matter. It's probably because I left some impression in the Red Moon Desert previously. She changed the topic. Su Li instantly understood. That's right, I almost forgot about this. Obviously she believed Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue changed the topic. Did you find anything here recently? Su Li sighed. There's no substantial progress. Chu Liyue wasn't surprised. From the attitude of the Yu Qian and the rest, it could be seen that they were very strict with the palace of the illusory god. Under such circumstances, it was extremely difficult to find out anything. De Bao and Lan Xiao must have been locked in an extremely secret place. This matter can't be rushed. It's better to take it slow. No matter what, now that we've entered the palace of the illusory god, we're finally one step closer. Su Li nodded. Nan Jinshu originally planned to return to his residence, but after taking a few steps, he saw Jun Jiuqing walking out of the main palace. He hesitated for a moment but still went over. Family E. Jun Jiuqing's gaze landed on him indifferently. Nan Jinshu suddenly felt a chill in his heart. For some reason, he felt that Jun Jiuqing's state today was a little different from usual. It seemed like he wasn't in a good mood? But didn't he just come out of the main palace? Not many people could have this kind of glory. He didn't have it either. Because of this, Nan Jinshu was envious of him for a long time. So when he saw Jun Jiuqing's current state, he really couldn't understand. However, this wasn't the main point. Family E Shangguan Yu is here. Jun Jiuqing's expression didn't change. I know. Seeing how calm he was, Nanjinshu instantly became anxious. Family E, aren't you curious or nervous at all? That's Shangguan you were talking about. Haven't you thought about how she came in without a bloodline totem? Jun Jiuqing didn't say anything. Nanjinshu gritted his teeth and lowered his voice. The Guqin score. It must be because of the Guqin score. The first 2 Guqin scores are with her. At first, Nanjinshu couldn't understand how Chu Luiyue broke the rules and successfully entered the illusion god's palace. Until just now, he suddenly realized that it must be because of the Guqin score. That belongs to the illusion god's palace. Since she's already its master, of course she can enter. Nanjinshu regretted it. He should have thought of this earlier. Otherwise, he wouldn't have offended her like that and dug such a big hole for himself. Now, even if he wanted to make peace, there was no hope. Jun Jiuqing looked a little impatient. I know what you're talking about. What are you trying to say? Nanjinshu's chest tightened. Why did it seem like Jun Jiuqing didn't care about such an important matter? Chapter 2368. That music score belongs to the illusion god palace. The Divine Master and the Divine Envoys haven't done anything yet. What can you do about it? Jun Jiuqing's voice was cold. Nanjinshu was taken aback and hastily said, he hurriedly said, it's not that I want to do anything. I'm just curious. The first Divine Envoy sent 2 Divine Envoys to the God-slaying mound to look for the 3rd music score, but they haven't returned yet. Are you talking about the 9th and 10th Divine Envoys? Jun Jiuqing interrupted him with a half-smile. They've returned a long time ago. Don't you know? What? Nanjinshu was stunned for a moment. He really didn't know. Ever since he fought with Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu and returned to the illusion god palace, he hadn't left his room. Because what happened that day was simply too humiliating. He had no choice but to wait for things to settle down. That was why he didn't know what was going on outside, including the fact that the 2 Divine Masters had returned. Not only have they returned, but they're also being punished in the illusion god ocean, Jun Jiuqing said flatly. Nanjinshu was stunned. He couldn't snap out of his daze for a long time. How is that possible? The 2 Divine Envoys were ordered to look for the 3rd music score. Even if they didn't find it, they shouldn't have been punished, right? Then do you know why they were punished? Jun Jiuqing smiled coldly. If you want to know, you can ask them yourself. After he finished speaking, he ignored Nanjinshu and left. Nanjinshu wanted to ask him a few more questions, but he didn't have the guts. Jun Jiuqing always gave him the feeling that he couldn't afford to offend him. Nanjinshu couldn't get anything out of Jun Jiuqing, so he had no choice but to leave. Chang Wanzhou was wiping the table in the room. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing his fair and slender wrists. He was holding a rag in his hand. His expression was focused and serious, as if this was something very important. When Cindy entered, this was the scene he saw. However, the moment he walked in, Chang Wanzhou immediately sensed his presence. He stopped what he was doing and turned around to look at him. Chang Wanzhou's lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but he held back in the end. However, his gaze towards Cindy was filled with respect. Cindy's gaze swept across the table. It was shiny and shiny. She really didn't know how many times he had wiped it. In fact, Chang Wanzhou had been doing this ever since Chu Luiyue went to the Star Passage and entered the illusory god palace. It seemed to be out of some uneasiness. When he was nervous or flustered, he would often do this. Master has already entered the illusory god palace, so there is no need to clean this place. Cindy Dao. Chang Wanzhou pursed his lips slightly. Yes. Chu Luiyue didn't stay in the illusory god palace for too long. After chatting with Su Li, she planned to go back first. After all, Wu Yao and the others were still waiting outside. Those who were allowed to enter the illusory god palace could enter and leave freely, so even if she wanted to leave now, she wouldn't encounter any obstruction. However, as soon as she stepped out, she saw a familiar face. Xu Jing. At this moment, she was standing outside the door, her eyes filled with resentment and unwillingness. Oh, 8th Divine Envoy, why are you here? Probably because she didn't expect Chu Luiyue to suddenly come out, a trace of guilt flashed across Xu Jing's face. Hearing that Chu Luiyue really finished the Star Passage and successfully entered the illusory god palace, Xu Jing's heart surged with waves that couldn't be calmed down for a long time. After struggling for a long time, she still came here. Originally, she just wanted to see what was going on, but who knew that Chu Luiyue would actually come out like this, and the two sides just happened to bump into each other. Xu Jing managed to control the expression on her face with difficulty. Nothing, I'm just a little curious as to how you came in. Chu Liyue's lips curved. Naturally, I walked in openly. Xu Jing unconsciously clenched her fists. I really underestimated you before. Thank you for the praise, 8th Divine Envoy. Chu Liyue smiled. I like to surprise people the most. You really have a sharp tongue. Xu Jing took a deep breath. It won't be too late to show off in front of this divine envoy when you ascend to the heavens and become a god. She didn't believe that Chu Liyue would really succeed when the time came. 8th Divine Envoy, you misunderstood me. When have I ever thought of showing off in front of the divine envoys? What's more, what I said was the truth. Could it be that in this illusory god palace, people like us can't even speak the truth? Or did the 8th Divine Envoy feel that these words were too harsh? Chu Liyue was really innocent. She had never taken the initiative to provoke this 8th Divine Envoy, but unfortunately, the other party always seemed to dislike her and always wanted to make things difficult for her. Why bother? Xu Jing was so angry that she laughed. You can say whatever you want. This divine envoy can't argue with you. However, since you've already entered the illusory god palace, this divine envoy will remind you, don't be too arrogant. Otherwise, you won't even know when you'll die. And your subordinates, it's best that they all follow the rules. This illusory god palace is not a place where you can behave atrociously. After saying that, she angrily left. Chu Liyue was left with a blank expression. Why did Xu Jing suddenly become so angry? And it seemed like it wasn't just directed at her? Chu Liyue looked at her thoughtfully, then walked towards the door. Arriving at the door, Chu Liyue pushed the door open and walked out. The situation was different from when she first came. This time she didn't attract that amazing pressure. Everything was very calm. But when Chu Liyue walked out, she was surprised to find that the people who were waiting outside on both sides of the Star Road hadn't left yet. The moment she walked out, countless pairs of eyes immediately fell on her. Chu Liyue was startled. Looking over, she finally understood why everyone was still gathered here. Xiao Ran was standing on the Star Road, cracking the last Xian formation. In front of him, just like Chu Liyue, a silver halo quietly floated. At this time, a portion of the vein patterns had already been drawn inside the halo. It could be seen that Xiao Ran's speed was much slower than Chu Liyue's, and the smoothness was also a bit worse. But the overall direction was correct. As long as there weren't any mistakes later, he would be able to completely display it sooner or later. At that time he would be like Chu Liyue, entering the illusory god palace from the Star Road. Xiao Ran's entire attention was on the Xian formation in front of him, to the extent that he didn't notice Chu Liyue coming out. However, the onlookers on both sides looked over with different expressions. Of course, compared to before, their attitudes and expressions had changed quite a bit. Master. Little Hachi smiled and waved her hand. Chu Liyue walked towards the few of them. Chapter 2369. Mistress, why did you come out so quickly? Little Hachi asked curiously. They had thought that they would have to wait for a long time. Chu Liyue smiled and said, I went in to find a place to stay, saw Mr. Su and Dumpling and came out. Dumpling is also here? Is she well? Yes. Chu Liyue did not say too much. She stepped forward and pinched Aunt 11 and Aunt 12's cheeks. It's been a long time since we last met. The two of you have grown up. You must have suffered a lot in my absence all these years. It was unknown how the two young ladies managed to survive being stranded outside. Now, they had even broken through to the Supreme God level. Aunt 11, who had always been calm, showed a rare look of nostalgia. It's not hard. Aunt 12's eyes were already red. She pulled Chu Liyue's sleeve and said, It's nothing. We're fine. It's still Master who had it the hardest. Although they had been outside, they had heard many rumors about Chu Liyue. It had not been easy for her to come all the way to where she was now. Big Brother has always taken care of us. He has never let us suffer. Hearing Aunt 12's words, Chu Liyue was relieved. Cini had done a good job in this regard. He had taken care of everything. He is also in the Illusion God Palace now. I will take you to see him. Shuang and the others are also there. As she spoke, Chu Liyue glanced at Wu Yao. She had to go back and talk about the Peach Blossom dock in detail. Wu Yao nodded imperceptibly. At this moment, Zhui walked forward and cupped his fists. He said with a joyful expression, Mistress, I haven't had time to congratulate you. When Chu Liyue finished the star path and entered the Illusion God Palace, he was too shocked and did not have time to say anything. He just watched as Chu Liyue went in. Now that he saw her come out, of course he had to go forward and congratulate her. Chu Liyue's lips curved up. Speaking of which, I still have to thank Treasure Pavilion. The mythical flame diagram, had indeed helped her clear her thoughts and gave her the most appropriate reason. No matter how suspicious others were, she only needed to release the mythical flame diagram. Mingshu hurriedly waved his hands. I wouldn't dare. You were able to succeed mainly because of your own strength. Our Zhenbao Pavilion also shares your honor and is very happy for you. Ah. These were Mingshu's heartfelt words. Over the years, it wasn't that no one had read the mythical diagram of flame, but in the end, only Chu Luiyue had truly comprehended all the profound formations on the star path and entered the illusory god palace. Wasn't this enough to explain the problem? Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows and smiled. You're too polite. I should be the one thanking the first master and second master. When the second master's body gets better, I will definitely pay him a visit personally. She probably wouldn't be able to meet the first master. But second master, however, she insisted on meeting him no matter what. His smile froze and he secretly complained in his heart. Why was Madame still thinking about this? Then I will definitely go back and talk to second master. Then I will have to trouble Lord Mingshu. After getting the answer he wanted, Chu Luiyue left with his people in satisfaction. The group of people left in such a carefree manner, leaving behind a group of people looking at each other in dismay. Just left like that? Why was the expression on Chu Luiyue's face as calm and collected as ever from the beginning to the end? She had finished the star path and entered the illusory god palace. If it were anyone else present they would probably be extremely excited. But she was like this, how to put it, it was as if all of this was natural for her. She had long expected this, or she had long been certain that she would be able to reach this step and obtain all of this. But she was just a person from the divine ruins world who didn't even have a bloodline totem. In the long 10,000 years, other than the seventh divine emissary Jinyan Lai, she was the only one who had entered the illusory god palace through the star path. Even they were excited about this for a long time, but she was the only one who was calm beyond imagination. In comparison their reaction seemed a bit excessive. Many people quieted down. After a long time, a low voice came from the crowd. Now that she has even entered the illusory god palace, will she really be able to ascend to the heavens and become a god in half a year? No one answered. They had already discovered that all of the rules and principles seemed to be useless in front of Chu Luiyue. All of the so-called restrictions and impossibilities had become a joke in front of her. Then who would dare to say that she couldn't? Chu Luiyue and the others walked back. As they walked, Chu Luiyue asked about the two girls. What made her feel more at ease was that Xin Yi really took care of the two of them. Other than not bringing them with him, he treated them even better than Little 13. Little 13 even had to undergo Xin Yi's strict tests, but the two girls didn't need to. They only needed to work hard to eat their fill. Compared to other people, the two of them didn't need to cultivate because the pills they swallowed contained a shocking amount of energy. And the two of them had special physiques so they could completely digest all of it and convert it into their own strength. As a result, his strength naturally increased. This was something that others couldn't help but envy. N11 thought for a while and asked, Master, what is it like inside the illusory god palace? Chu Luiyue only thought that she was curious, so she paused for a moment and said, Actually, there's nothing special, just that the spiritual power is more abundant and pure. Aunt 11 pursed her lips. Then, Master, can you bring us in to take a look? Chu Luiyue was really surprised this time. Aunt 11, you want to go in and take a look? Aunt 11 nodded and added, Sister also wants to go. Aunt 12 nodded lightly and looked at Chu Luiyue nervously. Mistress, is this inconvenient? I heard that ordinary people aren't allowed to enter the palace of the illusory god. It wouldn't be good if it made things difficult for Master. Chu Luiyue looked at the two of them thoughtfully. Probably because she had to take care of her sister. Aunt 11 had been independent since young and didn't like to trouble others. If she could do it herself, she would never ask others to help her. So she rarely took the initiative to ask for anything. As for Aunt 12, that was even more so. She had a soft personality and was very timid. Usually, if her tone was a little harsh, it would scare the little girl until her eyes turned red. Other than being obedient, she was obedient. She was extremely well behaved. And now, these two girls actually wanted to enter the illusory god palace to take a look? How rare. Chu Luiyue said, The illusory god palace is heavily guarded, so it's not easy to go in. Even I can't bring you in now. The expressions of the two girls dimmed significantly. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat and couldn't help but ask, Why do you want to go in so badly? Chapter 2370. Aunt 11 paused for a moment and said straightforwardly, No reason, I just want to go. Aunt 12 nodded. But if mistress is so difficult, we won't go, Chu Liwei thought for a while and touched the duo's faces. I'll think of a way. The two girls rarely asked her for anything. If there was hope, she would still want to satisfy their wishes. Little Hachi stood at the side and asked curiously, Mistress, other than what you just said, is there anything else different about the palace of the illusory god? Chu Liwei laughed. Even if there is, it's not something your mistress can know now. The palace of the illusory god was full of forbidden places. Moreover, she had just entered, so how could she know so much? Suli had stayed there for so long, but she had not made any progress. But I did see a few oracles. Chu Liwei remembered what happened before. The others were fine, but the 8th oracles seemed to have a deep hatred for me. Xu Jing? Yes. Little Hachi coughed. But I think I know. Chu Liwei looked at her in confusion. Little Hachi blinked innocently. It's just that I slapped her before. Who knew that she was still thinking about it? Chu Liwei was speechless. For a moment, even someone as eloquent as her didn't know what to say. And 11 was very curious. Sister 8, didn't they say that the oracles are very powerful? You slapped her, but she didn't look for trouble with you? Little Hachi shrugged. She spoke rudely, so I had to teach her a lesson. As for looking for trouble with me, does your sister 8 look like someone who can be bullied easily? Aunt 11 shook her head seriously. Aunt 12 whispered, I remember Sister 8 said that only we can bully others, but we can't let others step on us. Little Hachi immediately went over and kissed Aunt 12 happily. Sister 12 is really smart. You still remember this? 12th Nyang blushed and felt a little embarrassed. But when she saw Little Hachi's happy expression, she smiled too. I remember what Sister 8 said. Chu Liwei glanced at her faintly. Is this how a good memory is used? Of all things to remember, why do I have to remember this? No wonder Xu Jing was like that. No one would be able to tolerate this, right? However, there was something strange about this matter. Little Hachi, you gave her a slap and she let you go just like that? Xu Jing was not that kind of person. Little Hachi shrugged. Who knows? However, I saw that she seemed to have gotten herself into some trouble before, so I don't think she has the time or energy to think about it now. What's more, if she dares to take revenge, I'll immediately let everyone in the Illusion God Palace know that I slapped her. If this matter were to spread, Xu Jing wouldn't be able to stay in the Illusion God Palace anymore. Just the criticism and ridicule of everyone would be enough to drown her. Wu Yao followed behind them and shivered silently. He also mourned for Xu Jing for 3 seconds. Of all people to provoke, why did she have to provoke Little Hachi? In the 13 guards, other than Big Brother, the rest would take a deeder when they saw Little Hachi. Who would dare to provoke her? That Xu Jing was really too much. If she really couldn't handle it, she would have picked a soft persimmon. How unlucky. Chu Liwei thought for a while and said, it's better to be careful. Xu Jing would definitely take revenge for the smallest grievance. After being humiliated like this, she would definitely not let it go. For some reason she hadn't made a move yet, but it didn't mean that she wouldn't do it in the future. Little Hachi tucked her hair behind her back and smiled charmingly. I know. However, the premise was that Xu Jing still had the ability. If she couldn't even deal with the problem of the Herb Mountain, then how could she continue to be the 8th Oracle? The group returned to their residence. Before they could enter the door, they saw Hua Shuangshuang walking over from another direction. Second brother. Wu Yao was the first to shout. Hua Shuangshuang looked up and was instantly delighted. 11th sister. 12th sister. Why are you here? Come and take a good look at me. Wu Yao was speechless. Hua Shuangshuang walked over quickly. He was very tall. Even though the 2 girls had grown up, they only reached his chest when they stood in front of him. Hua Shuangshuang bent down and patted their heads gently. It's been a long time since we last met. You've grown so tall. Aunt 11 and Aunt 12 were obviously very happy. They shouted in unison, hello, second brother. Aunt 11 looked over his shoulder. Second brother, what's this? Hua Shuangshuang tilted his shoulders slightly. Golden-winged raven-boned beast. I just picked it up a while ago. With a flap of its wings, the raven-boned beast flew onto Aunt 11's arm. Aunt 11 praised, it's so beautiful. Sensing that Hua Shuangshuang was very close to Aunt 11, the raven-boned beast let down its guard and rubbed its head against the back of Aunt 11's hand. Aunt 12 looked envious. Sister, it seems to like you a lot. Aunt 11 stretched out her hand. Here. Aunt 12 quickly waved her hand and took a step back. I don't want it. The raven-boned beast looked a little fierce. She had always been a little afraid of it. Hua Shuangshuang laughed. 12th sister, look at this. As he spoke, he looked back and snapped his fingers. Come here. As soon as he finished speaking, a round furry little head popped out from behind the corner. Hua Shuang waved his hand. That little thing was immediately encouraged and ran over to them. Its fur was white and golden, and it had a pair of big black eyes. Its 4 hooves were pure black. It was a divine beast, Windstrider tiger. However, this Windstrider tiger was still very young. It looked like it was only a month old. Even though it tried its best to run over, its short legs were still not fast enough. Unexpectedly, it looked a little silly and adorable. Aunt 12's heart melted. Ah! She had no resistance to this kind of thing. The Windstrider tiger ran to Hua Shuang's feet and rubbed against them intimately. Hua Shuang clapped his hands, and the Windstrider tiger jumped onto his hands. Its body was still very small, and it was not even as long as Hua Shuang's forearm. Hua Shuang handed the Windstrider tiger over. You're not afraid of this one, right? Aunt 12 nodded repeatedly and asked a little nervously. Second brother, can I really carry it? Hua Shuang laughed. Of course. Aunt 12 stretched out her hands and carefully carried the little Windstrider tiger into her arms. The little thing was not afraid of strangers. It sniffed Aunt 12's body. It smelled sweet and fragrant, and immediately lay down in her arms comfortably. Aunt 12 looked at it curiously and happily for a while. She could not help but ask. Second brother, did you pick this up too? It looks very small. Why didn't it follow its mother? Hua Shuang nodded and frowned slightly. Yes, when I found it, its mother was already dead. Chapter 2371. Aunt 12 let out an ah as she looked at the wind-stepping tiger in her arms. Her heart ached. How could this be? Hua Shuang paused and hesitated. After a moment, he didn't directly answer her question. I think it met with an accident. It's still young, so I brought it back. He had always been close to all kinds of fiends and had raised countless of them over the years, so Aunt 12 and the others didn't mind. On the other hand, Chu Luiyue took another look at the wind-stepping tiger and fell into deep thought. This was obviously a fiend from the Illusion God Palace. If he remembered correctly, all the fiends here were raised in the Divine Beast Mountain, and the second envoy Yu Qian was in charge. Of course, the Divine Beast Mountain was completely open. Anyone could go, but they couldn't take the fiends away. Unless the cultivator formed a contract with the fiends. It was expected that Hua Shuang liked to go to the Divine Beast Mountain, but Chu Luiyue really didn't expect that he would bring one back. From what he said, it seemed that there was more to it. Chu Luiyue didn't ask in detail. He smiled and said, let's go in. Sun Yi and the others are also here. As soon as he entered the courtyard, he saw Sun Yi walking out of the house. When Aunt 11 and the others saw him, they were also very happy. Sun Yi's expression was also a little gentler. The group was very lively together. Chu Luiyue looked around but didn't see Rong Xiu. Sun Yi saw this and immediately said, Master, His Highness Saint is in seclusion. Chu Luiyue was stunned. She had known Rong Xiu for many years, but she rarely heard of him in seclusion. I understand. She looked at Wu Yao. Let's go in and talk. Mirror? In the room, after hearing Wu Yao's statement, Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. Wu Yao nodded. Before we came, not only did the mirror not disappear, but it seemed to become clearer and more concrete as time passed. Chu Luiyue's hand slowly clenched. Did anything appear on the mirror? For example, Wu's shadow. That's not true. Wu Yao shook his head. Yu Jiu and I have been guarding the mirror day and night, but the mirror is always shining brightly. It's hard to look at it directly, let alone see a human figure. Chu Luiyue fell silent. For a moment he didn't know what to feel. It seemed like what she saw before wasn't an illusion. There was indeed a mirror in the Dao world. However, for some reason, there was no sign of Rong Xiu or her in the mirror. Or perhaps, only when the two of them stood in front of the mirror would such a scene appear. Chu Luiyue fell into deep thought. Every time she recalled the scene of that day, her heart would always feel faintly uneasy. The face reflected in the mirror was clearly the one she was most familiar with, but for some reason, it felt very unfamiliar. And Rong Xiu, Master? Master. After Wu Yao finished speaking, he saw that Chu Luiyue didn't respond for a long time. He couldn't help but raise his voice and shout twice. Chu Luiyue came back to his senses. Wu Yao looked at her expression and asked, Master, what do you think? How should we deal with this matter? Chu Luiyue knocked on the table. Let's wait and see. Since Wu Yao and the others had already made the arrangements and nothing else had happened, they could be a little relieved for the time being. We'll report when there's another abnormality in the mirror. This matter was obviously not under their control, so the only thing they could do now was to wait. Wu Yao was a little surprised, but seeing that Chu Luiyue had made up her mind, he also responded, yes. Chu Luiyue came to the courtyard again and saw that Hua Shuang and the others were still playing with the baby wind-stepping tiger in the courtyard. Shuang, come here. Hearing this, Hua Shuang immediately walked over. Master. Chu Luiyue raised her chin. What's going on with the baby wind-stepping tiger? There was some hesitation on Hua Shuang's face. After a while he explained, it's my fault. Chu Luiyue looked at him. Hua Shuang sighed. Some time ago, I went to God Beast Mountain and saw a wind-stepping tiger with a cub. I liked it, so I stayed with it for a while. Later, the wind-stepping tiger wanted to go with me, but I declined. Chu Luiyue nodded. Of course, Hua Shuang had her own considerations. It was obviously against the rules to casually bring out the demonic beasts of God Beast Mountain. If she was careless, it would cause trouble. When I went back later, I saw that the wind-stepping tiger had been killed. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched. Killed by someone? Hua Shuang nodded. Chu Luiyue was silent for a moment. Except for the second oracle, Yu Qian, there was no one else who dared to do this on God Beast Mountain. Why did he do this? He was in charge of God Beast Mountain. It was reasonable to say that these demonic beasts should follow his orders. He had no reason to do this. Maybe because... Hua Shuang paused. In fact, I'm not very sure. But after the wind-stepping tiger died, all its teeth were pulled out. Chu Luiyue knitted her brows tightly. You mean, the wind-stepping tiger might have bitten Yu Qian? Wait, there is indeed a scar on Yu Qian's hand. When she entered the palace of the illusory god, she said a few words to Yu Qian. At that time, she inadvertently saw a few faint scars on Yu Qian's hand. But she didn't care at that time. Now that she thought about it, maybe it was really because of the wind-stepping tiger? Chu Luiyue murmured in a low voice, but, it shouldn't be. Isn't he in charge of God Beast Mountain? Why would the wind-stepping tiger attack him? Chapter 2372. Hua Shuang sighed. When I went there again, I saw the real body of the wind-striding tiger. This little one was protected under its body and saved its life. I thought that it was still too young and it wasn't safe to stay there alone, so I brought it back. Such a cub wouldn't attract much attention even if it left the God Beast Mountain. Chu Luiyue nodded. Let's raise it first. It just so happens that Ant 12 and the others like it very much. Hua Shuang paused and said, Master, what they like the most isn't actually magical beasts. Chu Luiyue's eyelids twitched. At this moment she suddenly saw Tsin take out 2 universe rings and hand them to Ant 11 and Ant 12. These are some pills that little Hachi refined previously. Take them first. The 2 girls obediently took them and thanked little Hachi. Thank you, Sister 8. Little Hachi, who was lying on the rattan chair, sat up with a look of surprise. It turned out that Big Brother didn't ask her for those pills just to force her to break through as soon as possible, but also for Ant 11 and Ant 12. His previous resentment instantly dissipated and little 8 said with a smile, Big Brother, you should have said so earlier. Tsin continued. If you need anything in the future, just ask her for it. Little Hachi's smile froze. Although she had always taken care of Ant 11 and Ant 12, how could she afford to raise them all by herself? Even if she refined pills day and night, it wouldn't be enough. Ant 12 looked at Tsin, then looked at little Hachi. Finally, she gently tugged at Ant 11's sleeve. Sister, in this case, won't Sister 8 be very tired? Ant 11 nodded her head seriously and said, Big Brother, Sister 8, don't worry. I heard that there's a mountain of herbs here. It's the same if we go there. Little Hachi immediately rejected. How can that be? Although there were a lot of heavenly treasures there, it would be inappropriate for his 2 younger sisters to eat them directly. She patted her chest. Don't worry, Sister 8 will think of a way. Bang. At this moment, a sound came from one of the houses. Immediately after, a rich medicinal fragrance spread out from within. Little Hachi's eyes lit up and she quickly stood up. The door opened and Jian Fengqi walked out with a jade box in his hand. His handsome face was filled with excitement. Success. After experiencing countless failures, he had finally crossed the threshold of being a senior doctor. Great. A tender and soft congratulatory voice could be heard. Jian Fengqi was stunned. He looked up and was stunned. Little Hachi had unknowingly appeared in front of him with a smile on her face. When she smiled, she was naturally extremely beautiful and charming. Her pair of watery eyes seemed to be able to speak, rippling with light. However, Jian Fengqi could not see her beauty at all. He could only remember the tragic memories of being constantly attacked and being kicked in the foot. Therefore, he subconsciously took a step back. "What are you doing?" Little Hachi blinked. "Nothing, I'm just happy for you that you've broken through to senior doctor." Jian Fengqi narrowed his eyes warily. He did not dare to believe Little Hachi's words now. Little Hachi turned around and waved. "Sister 11, Sister 12. Come over quickly." Only then did Jian Fengqi see that there were actually two more girls in the courtyard. Aunt 11 and 12? Seeing those familiar yet unfamiliar faces, Jian Fengqi was instantly happy. In his memory, these two were still young girls. In the blink of an eye, they were already slender and elegant. Aunt 11 pulled Aunt 12 over. "Brother Fengqi." This greeting really made Jian Fengqi burst with joy. "You two are here too?" Little Hachi looked at the two and smiled. "Look, your brother Fengqi is now a senior doctor. If you're hungry in the future, come to him. He has a lot of stock here." Jian Fengqi's heart sank. "Wait, what do you mean by this?" At this moment he suddenly remembered the old stories about these two girls. They already had a huge appetite a few years ago, but now, Jian Fengqi's mouth twitched harshly. "Don't be anxious. Hurry up and thank Brother Fengqi," Little Hachi urged with a grin. Aunt 11 immediately said. "Thank you, Brother Fengqi." Aunt 12 also whispered. Thank you, Brother Fengqi." Jian Fengqi was speechless. How can I resist now that things have come to this? I seem to have been cheated. Chu Luiyue looked at him sympathetically. How great is it to break through to senior doctor? In the end, before he could celebrate, Little Hachi and the rest had already taken advantage of him. Yes, there should be a lot more to come. Jian Fengqi seemed to sense Chu Luiyue's gaze and looked over with difficulty. Chu Luiyue gave him a thumbs up. "Fengqi is really generous. I'm impressed." Jian Fengqi was speechless. Is it too late to go back and pretend that I haven't broken through? At this moment, the void suddenly fluctuated. Immediately after, a figure fell from it. Jian Fengqi was quick to react as he immediately went forward and hugged her. This had happened many times recently and he had already practiced it. "Io?" Mu Hongyu closed her eyes and waited for the fall. However, after waiting for a while, the expected pain didn't come. Instead, it seemed like, something doesn't seem right? She suddenly opened her eyes and bumped into Jian Fengqi's smug face. "Hongyu, your skills have improved recently. You can always land in my arms so accurately, Mu Hongyu expressionlessly retracted her fist and jumped down. "Isn't this more accurate?" She said she would hit the left eye, but she definitely wouldn't hit the right eye. Jian Fengqi was heartbroken. You heartless person." Mu Hongyu clapped her hands. "You're too weak. You dodge so slowly. If I don't hit you, who should I hit?" Jian Fengqi choked. Aunt 11 looked at Mu Hongyu, then at Jian Fengqi. "Brother Fengqi, is this sister-in-law?" Mu Hongyu was speechless. This young lady is so pretty, but why is her eyesight so bad? Almost. Jian Fengqi immediately replied. Mu Hongyu rolled her eyes at him. Just as she was about to retort, Jian Fengqi took out a piece of paper from somewhere. I don't think this is the contract." He rubbed his palm and the piece of paper turned into powder. "Mu Hongyu, I'll endure it." She turned and walked towards Chu Luiyue. Swoosh. Jian Fengqi flapped his folding fan, covering half of his dark eye, and winked at Aunt 11. "Not bad." Aunt 11 gestured a number. 10 Master Physician pills. Chapter 2373. Jian Fengqi's forehead twitched. "This is robbery." He shook his head. "No, I can only give you 5 at most." Aunt 11 squinted at him. 5. She and her sister couldn't even split them. This is too stingy. She extended her second finger expressionlessly. 20. Jian Fengqi's fingers trembled and his heart bled. You. Aunt 11, why are you becoming more and more like your master? Not to mention other things, this blackmail skill was really amazing. Aunt 11 raised her eyebrows. Aunt 12 was very envious and whispered. Sister, Brother Fengqi is praising you. Aunt 11, I heard. Jian Fengqi? Aunt 12 sighed. She also knew that she was too soft and couldn't even learn 1/10 of her master's skills. She couldn't compare to her sister, who was always clean and straightforward. Therefore, she had always admired her sister for coming here. I can't. You'll be fine as long as you stay by master's side in the future. Aunt 11 consoled. Aunt 12 nodded vigorously. Okay. Aunt 11 raised her chin. Aunt 12 mustered her courage, extended her hand and stammered. Dish 30. Jian Fengqi, I can't live like this. He gritted his teeth. 20. I can't give more. Deal. Aunt 11 stopped, satisfied. Jian Fengqi felt a little stuffy in his chest, and he pounded it a few times before he could breathe again. On the other side, Mu Hongyu had already arrived in front of Chu Luiyue. Her eyes were filled with excitement. Seeing this, Chu Luiyue vaguely guessed something. Mu Hongyu lowered her voice. Luyu, I left the heavenly gate today. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. Although I wasted a lot of time and effort in the middle, I finally succeeded. And I shouldn't have been discovered. Mu Hongyu was also very excited. During this period she had been studying the Mahayana realm, but unfortunately because there was no one to guide her, her progress was slow. Helpless, she could only try again and again. She couldn't even remember how many times she had failed. But he finally succeeded. Chu Luiyue took her hand and walked to the side. Does anyone else know about this? Mu Hongyu shook her head. I've already checked before. The person in charge of guarding the gate of heaven is the 11th divine envoy Qiu Tong. However, his strength is not as strong as the 7th divine envoy Jinyan Lai. His control over the gate of heaven is also much weaker. It's not difficult to avoid him. Her almond eyes sparkled. Luyu, now that we're out of the heavenly gate, I'll definitely be able to enter the illusionary god ocean and find master after some time. Chu Luiyue stared at her. Perhaps it was because she had failed countless times during this period of time, but there were many scars on Mu Hongyu's face and body. However, she had never said that she would give up and had persevered until now. Chu Luiyue gently exhaled. Hongyu, thank you. Mu Hongyu shook her head. What kind of relationship do we have? You're treating me like an outsider. Moreover, I also want to save Master as soon as possible. This is what I should do. The illusionary god ocean was dangerous and treacherous. Fifth Zhangzi was trapped in it and suffered much more pain than she did. Therefore, she didn't dare to relax for a moment. Her mind was filled with this matter. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up and his gaze was fixed. That day won't be far away. That's right. Mu Hongyu suddenly thought of something. The 9th and 10th divine envoys seemed to be imprisoned in the illusionary god ocean as well. What? Chu Luiyue was shocked. How is that possible? Are you sure? Didn't we see those two before? I won't be wrong. It's them. However, they're imprisoned in different places from masters. I wanted to investigate carefully, but I was worried that I would be discovered if I was out for too long, so I hurried back. Mu Hongyu was confused. I don't know why they're imprisoned. Chu Luiyue fell silent. Most people in the illusionary god palace obviously didn't know about this. The only person who could imprison them in the illusionary god ocean was the divine lord or the first divine envoy. According to Nanjin Shu, the two divine envoys had gone to the god-slaying tomb on the orders of the first divine envoy. In that case, there was an 80 to 90% chance that this matter was the work of that person. Was it because they couldn't get the music score? But at that time in the god-slaying tomb they weren't even there. When Chu Luiyue arrived at the tomb of the god, the two divine envoys were already gone. Now that he thought about it, he was still confused. Chu Luiyue thought for a moment and said, since no one knows about this, let's keep it a secret. Mu Hongyu nodded. I know. As she spoke, she asked curiously, what's the matter? Luyu, I heard that you've entered the palace of the illusionary god? Chu Luiyue smiled. Why are you all so curious about the palace of the illusionary god? Of course. All the cultivators in the palace of the illusionary god want to go in. Mu Hongyu rubbed her nose. By the way, I heard from Lord Ji that I'll be qualified to enter the palace of the illusionary god after reaching the Mahayana realm. Chu Luiyue also knew about this. The palace of the illusionary god was powerful and sacred. All the cultivators wanted to go in and have a look. Other than the divine envoys, the other cultivators had several ways to get in. The first way was to comprehend all the Shen arrays on the star path like Chu Luiyue and enter from the front door. The second way was to become a refiner saint and get a trace of energy from the chaotic sacred jade to enter. The third way was to become a medical saint. This was also very difficult. Xu Jing was the only medical saint in the entire illusionary god palace. In the past 10,000 years, no one had broken through to become a medical saint. Of course, this was related to Xu Jing's strict supervision of the Herb Mountain. Her rules made many celestial physicians unable to fully explore their talents and potential. Although they were free now, it was very difficult for anyone to break through in a short period of time. Originally, Liang He was very popular. Unfortunately, he suffered a series of setbacks recently and was unable to recover. It had been a long time since he appeared in front of everyone. There was only half a year left before the heavenly gate closed. It was impossible for him to cross the threshold of a medical saint. The most special one was Mu Hongyu. As long as she broke through the Mahayana realm, she could enter the palace of the illusionary god. But for those cultivators who had the same constitution as her, not to mention the Mahayana realm, many of them couldn't even break through the minor realization realm. Therefore this path wasn't easy to walk. The remaining cultivators had no way to enter the palace of the illusionary god in advance. Their only chance was to ascend to the heavens and become a god in half a year. This success rate was higher than the previous ones. Of course this was relative. Most people could only stay outside forever. Chapter 2374. Zhenbao Pavilion. Zhao rushed back quickly. Because most people were attracted by the commotion on the star path, there were not many guests in Zhenbao Pavilion today. After he came back, he locked the door and went up to the second floor, heading straight for the room at the end of the corridor. Yen Gu was standing by the window with his hands behind his back. Second Master. Hearing the commotion, Yen Gu turned around with a proud smile on his face. You're back. Looking at his expression, Zhao knew that he must have known everything that happened on Chu Liyue's side. But this was normal. After such a big commotion it was hard not to know. Madame entered the palace of the illusory god. After a while she went out again. It seems that a few of her subordinates came. Mingshu told him the truth. Also, Xiao Ran was inspired by Madame and is trying to crack the last Shen formation. If nothing goes wrong he should succeed this time. Zhao was also surprised by this. He stroked his beard and sighed. That's hard to come by. Xiao Ran has been stuck on this for too long. He had a good relationship with Xiao Ran, so he was naturally happy to hear this news. Mingshu paused and asked. Second Master, Madame said that when you get better, she wants to visit you personally. Yen Gu waved his hand. No. Just say that I'm bedridden and seriously ill. Anyway, he could not meet her now. Before his master gave the order, he did not dare to make a decision. Zhao. Then are you going to keep hiding like this? How many times had he said this? Madame clearly did not intend to give up and insisted on meeting him at least once. Yen Gu also had a headache. He rubbed his temples. Wait for Master's news. Yes. Dumpling was sent to the boundary by Yu Qian. She stopped in her tracks. I'm here. Can you leave now? She felt really uncomfortable staying with this person. Yu Qian did not care about Dumpling's disgust. Anyway, she just needed to cultivate properly and open her meridians as soon as possible. Yu Qian looked down at her condescendingly. His voice was as gentle as ever, but the words he said were extremely domineering. Before you open your 8th meridian, you cannot cross this barrier and enter the palace of the illusory god. What? Dumpling frowned. I don't agree. I don't want to. How did she know when he would be able to open his 8th meridian? If it didn't open in 10 years, didn't that mean she wouldn't be able to come for 10 years? That's not what you said earlier. I've changed my mind. Yu Qian smiled. If Chu Liyue hadn't come in, it wouldn't have mattered if Dumpling had come in. But now, no. Even though there was no contract between the two of them, Tuanzi had grown up by Chu Liyue's side and was very dependent on her. If things continued like today, then the bond between her and Dumpling would never be completely removed. Therefore it was better to cut the Gordian knot. If you don't want her to be bullied in the palace of the illusory god, it's best if you can break through as soon as possible. Yu Qian's words were already an undisguised threat. Dumpling gritted her teeth, her small face flushed red with anger, and her eyes instantly burned with golden flames. However, Yu Qian didn't seem to care. The current Dumpling was still not his match. After a long confrontation, Dumpling finally gritted her teeth and said, "All right. Just you wait." Sooner or later, she would settle the old and new grudges with these people. With that, she tiptoed and headed straight for Fengming Mountain. A resplendent light flashed past, and her figure disappeared behind the barrier in the blink of an eye. Yu Qian stood there for a while before turning around and leaving. Dumpling returned to Fengming Mountain with a belly full of anger. When she arrived at the top of the mountain, she took out her ancestor's golden feather and gently brushed it with her small hand. "Grandpa Patriarch, don't worry, I won't be bullied by them forever." A faint light flashed across the ancestor's golden feather. Dumpling carefully put it away and decided to turn her anger into motivation. If he didn't want her to go, then she wouldn't go. Anyway, you could come over. However, she didn't know if that black shadow would come and peek at her again after today. After sitting there for a while, Dumpling put away her thoughts and began to cultivate again. Chu Luiwei originally wanted to see Rong Xiu and discuss some things with him. Unfortunately, he was in seclusion and she didn't know how long it would take for him to come out. She didn't continue to wait and returned to the palace of the illusory god after dealing with the matters here. At this time, Xiao Ran's profound formation had already completed one of 3 parts. There were still a lot of onlookers. However, when Chu Luiwei came again, she found that Mu Yafeng's figure seemed to have disappeared. She thought for a moment and a faint smile flashed across her lips, but it disappeared in an instant. Then she entered the palace of the illusory god. Chu Luiwei walked alone to her residence. When she passed by the 7th divine emissary's courtyard, she stopped and looked over. However, she wasn't looking at Jinyun Lai. The first divine emissary lived in a remote and quiet place, obviously not wanting to be disturbed. Although Chu Luiwei was curious, she knew that this wasn't the time to go over. Even the other divine emissaries found it difficult to meet him, let alone her. At this moment, a gaze fell on her. Chu Luiwei looked over and nodded slightly at Jinyun Lai, who had just walked out. He didn't come out but stood on the steps and looked over. Chu Luiwei smiled and turned to leave. Jinyun Lai frowned slightly. Chu Luiwei didn't seem to be coming for him just now. After thinking for a moment, he turned his head and pondered. Was Chu Luiwei looking at the first divine emissary just now? Chapter 2375. In the following period of time, Chu Luiwei stayed alone in his courtyard, cultivating quietly and never went out again. However, outside it was getting more and more lively. Herb Mountain. Little Hachi brought Aunt 11 and Aunt 12 here, planning to choose more herbs to make some snacks for the 2 girls. It was the first time the 2 girls came here, so they were naturally very curious and excited, looking around from time to time. There were also many people looking at them. Little Hachi was already eye-catching enough by herself, and now with the addition of the beautiful twins, they easily stole everyone's attention. Sister 8, there are so many people here. Aunt 12 had always been afraid of strangers, and now that there were many people looking at them, she was even more shy and subconsciously hid behind Aunt 12. There seemed to be more people than before. Little Hachi nodded in agreement. She had been here many times before, but she had never seen so many people at the same time. There were shadows flashing on almost every mountain, and there were more than 1 or 2. Someone beside her heard her words and couldn't help but explain. Miss Little Hachi, there's only half a year left before the divine gate closes, so of course everyone is nervous. Little Hachi turned her head to look, and the person who spoke was a young man. She blinked and smiled. Oh right, I almost forgot about that. There was a saying in the illusory god palace that the divine gate would close in half a year, and those who couldn't enter the illusory god palace before then would have to wait for the next opportunity. And the next time they would have to wait for tens of thousands of years. Such a long time was really unbearable. So many people worked hard, hoping to successfully enter the illusory god palace before then. For a celestial doctor, they had to break through to the medical saint level to obtain this qualification. It was easy to say but difficult to do. The difficulty of this was no less than the star path of a mystic master. However, cramming at the last minute doesn't seem to be very useful, right? Little Hachi was a little disapproving. The young man suddenly felt a little embarrassed. Although that's the case, if you work harder, you can always have more hope, right? Number 8 shrugged and curled the corners of his lips. Although I don't really care about it, thank you anyway. The young man's face reddened slightly. Little Hachi looked at the 2 girls beside her. Let's go. Just as he took a step forward, the young man spoke again. Miss Little Hachi, please wait. Little Hachi paused and turned around. Is there anything else? Actually, it's nothing important. It's just that. I heard that Little Hachi already has someone she likes? The young man asked carefully. He stared at Little Hachi without blinking, afraid that he would miss something. As soon as this was said, many people around immediately pricked up their ears. There had long been rumors that Little Hachi had firmly rejected Liang He because she already had someone she liked. Moreover, that person had also come up from the Divine Ruins world and was currently in the illusory god palace. Unfortunately, that person didn't seem to come out much, so no one had seen him before. Over time, some people began to have doubts about this matter. Now that someone had asked, everyone was naturally very concerned. Aunt 11 and Aunt 12 immediately looked at Little Hachi with bright eyes. She had Sister 8's husband? Why hadn't they heard Sister 8 mention it before? According to Sister 8's personality, it shouldn't be. Little Hachi bent her finger and gently tapped on their foreheads. After not seeing each other for a few years, her gossipy heart was still the same. She tucked her hair behind her ear and smiled. Yes, what's wrong? Hearing her affirmative answer, many people revealed disappointed expressions. The young man's expression also froze. After a while he replied awkwardly. That, to be able to make little Hachi fall in love with someone like that, he must be very outstanding, right? Otherwise, why would she give up on Liang He? Little Hachi's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. This seems like he's trying to get some information out of me. However, she didn't mind. She didn't even hesitate to reject Liang He, let alone these people. Originally, she pulled Yan Qing in to avoid these troubles. Thinking of this, she nodded with a smile. Yes. Seeing that little Hachi wasn't willing to reveal too much, there were still people who didn't give up and asked. I've always heard of this person, but no one has seen him before. Little Hachi, even if your sweetheart has a shy personality, it's strange that he hasn't come out after being in the Illusion God Palace for so long, right? Once this was said, it immediately attracted the approval of many people. Ever since Liang He returned, they were very curious about that person. It was a pity that he didn't even come out of the courtyard, so it was really difficult to meet him. Now that someone finally asked, everyone naturally wanted to hear it. Little Hachi crossed her arms and said lazily, he doesn't like to come out, so naturally he doesn't come out. What's so strange about that? Although that was what she said, little Hachi actually had the same question in her heart. Logically speaking, Yan Qing's talent wasn't bad, and he also had the bloodline totem of the Yuntian Tower. Even in the Illusion God Palace where geniuses gathered, he would be one of the best. However, he didn't seem to have any interest in these things. Most of the time he stayed in the courtyard and didn't come out. Even when he went out occasionally, not many people seemed to have seen him. However, she didn't plan to discuss these questions with these outsiders. Many people looked at each other. After a while, someone couldn't help but ask. Miss Little Hachi, this person can't be hiding something, right? Little Hachi's beautiful eyes were instantly dyed with a layer of coldness. She sneered, our family's brother Yan Qing is extraordinarily handsome and talented. How can you casually slander him? As soon as he finished speaking, he heard a sharp female voice. Who are you talking about? Chapter 2376. Little Hachi was annoyed when she heard this voice. She turned around and saw an annoying face. Why was this Xu Jing haunting her like a ghost? Little Hachi's gaze lingered on her face for a moment, and her red lips curved into a perfect arc. Eighth Oracle, I haven't seen you in a few days. Your complexion seems to be much better than before. Xu Jing's chest felt stifled. How could she not hear the ridicule in her voice? But in front of so many people, she couldn't refute anything. Little Hachi had always been unpredictable. Who knew if she would directly reveal what happened that day? Moreover, she didn't care about this person right now. Whether my complexion is good or bad has nothing to do with you. Answer my question. Whose name did you just call? Once again, Xu Jing brought out her prestige as the 8th Divine Envoy and used her status to suppress Little 8. Little Hachi blinked. Strange, why did it seem like Xu Jing cared about what she said just now? She chuckled softly and enunciated each word clearly. I was talking about my family's older brother Yan Qing. Why does the 8th Oracle care so much about my personal matters? Hearing the words Yan Qing, Xu Jing's heart skipped a beat. But then she felt that she was overthinking it. It must be someone with the same name. She had heard some news about Little Hachi's so-called sweetheart before. If he remembered correctly, that person had come up from the Divine Ruins realm, and was only a god. How could this person be the same person as that person? It's nothing. I just feel that his name might need to be changed. Little Hachi was immediately unhappy. People could be called whatever they wanted. How could she say that someone's name wasn't good and ask them to change their name? Why, what does my family's older brother Yan Qing's name have to do with the 8th Oracle? Seeing Xu Jing's arrogant and displeased expression, Little Hachi felt even angrier. However, Xu Jing suddenly smiled, but there was no smile in his eyes. I'm doing this for the good of you and him. You should know that not everyone can use the name Yan Qing. Liking her or not is a small matter, but offending the left divine general of the emperor is not a small sin. Little Hachi was stunned. Left divine general? Who was this? She didn't seem to have heard of him before. However, after hearing Xu Jing's words, the crowd was in an uproar. So Yan Qing is the name of the left divine general? This is the first time I've heard of it? Me too. The two divine generals rarely appeared in public and had always been extremely mysterious. Very few people even knew their names. I didn't expect the 8th divine emissary to say it out loud today. Isn't this also a coincidence? Coincidentally, I met someone with the same name as the Divine General of the Left. This matter has to be handled carefully. After all, that is the Divine General of the Left. Little Hachi frowned. She had never heard of the Left Divine General, but she knew how powerful the Emperor was. She had heard that even the Divine Lord of the Illusion God Palace had to be respectful to the Emperor. Then the people around him shouldn't be provoked. Especially the title of the Left Divine General. It didn't sound simple. Xu Jing looked arrogant and said lightly, "If he still wants to stay in the Illusion God Palace, he better change his name." Little Hachi narrowed her eyes and laughed. Who is the Left Divine General? Why would he care about such a small matter? Eighth Divine Emissary, I think you shouldn't measure the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. Xu Jing's expression changed. Actually, with her understanding of the Emperor, he wasn't someone who would care about such things. She just felt uncomfortable when she heard Little Hachi yelling at him, so she came up with such an excuse. But she didn't expect Little Hachi to not care at all. Little Hachi's slender waist turned slightly and she turned around. 11th sister, 12th sister, let's go. If you like anything, just tell Sister 8. The two girls nodded. Thank you, Sister 8. Seeing that the three of them were about to leave, Xu Jing asked in disbelief. Wait, you're leaving just like that? Little Hachi turned around in surprise. What else? The corners of her lips curled up and her eyes twinkled. After I'm done here, I still have to go back to see Brother Yan Qing. Oh, right, I don't think the 8th Divine Emissary understands the feeling of not seeing each other for 3 years. I won't say too much to you. After saying that, the three of them walked briskly toward a mountain peak, ignoring Xu Jing. Xu Jing was angry and the onlookers were also sad. It seemed that Little Hachi and that Yan Qing had a good relationship. Then they probably didn't have a chance. After staring at Little Hachi and the others for a while, Xu Jing turned around and left. Illusory God Palace. In the room, Chu Luiyue was sitting quietly. After circulating her divine power for one cycle, she slowly opened her eyes. The elemental energy here was indeed incomparable to the outside world. She had only stayed here for a short period of time, but she could clearly feel that her aura had improved. The most important thing was that the situation here wasn't like the one in the Red Moon Desert, where the elemental energy kept pouring into the cultivator's body, causing the cultivator to explode and die. Everything here seemed to be operating in a very orderly and calm manner. She stood up and was about to pour a cup of tea when she suddenly felt a gaze on her. She narrowed her eyes. That was an extremely familiar aura. The next moment, she moved her wrist and a stream of divine power flew out. Who is it? Digression. Some people were waiting for her return while others watched her leave. And the pitiful February was still waiting for the monthly ticket. Tomorrow afternoon there would be a little more. Then the Godly Doctor would be serialized for 1 year and 5 months. This might be the last full month for the Godly Doctor. Unfortunately, the Godly Doctor had never entered the top 10 monthly ticket sales. Perhaps there wouldn't be such a chance in the future. Therefore, she hoped that the readers of the Godly Doctor would save the monthly ticket for her this time. Chapter 2377. That gaze instantly disappeared. Chu Liwei hurriedly walked out and looked in the direction of the gaze she felt. It was empty. She frowned slightly. Her feeling just now was definitely not wrong. Someone was indeed looking at her and it was extremely familiar. Unfortunately, the other party left too quickly, and she didn't have time to carefully identify who it was. In the palace of the illusory god, she was most familiar with Su Li. Other than that, there was also Jun Jiuqing and Nan Jinshu. Perhaps Jin Yunlai and Yu Chen could also be considered. But it didn't seem to be them. Moreover, these people didn't seem to have the need to do this. If they wanted to see her, they could just come and see her directly. Why did they have to do this? Chu Luiyue wanted to return to her room, but after thinking carefully, she still walked outside. The palace of the illusory god was very large, and the roads were winding and complicated. It was easy to get lost walking in it. But Chu Luiyue didn't seem to have such worries. She just followed the path and walked forward casually, looking around as she walked. The surroundings were very quiet. Thinking about it, in the palace of the illusory god, there were very few people who could enter except for the divine envoys. Moreover, this place was so big that they were basically scattered. Previously in the Red Moon Desert, she only saw a corner of the palace of the illusory god through the illusion. Now that she was inside, she saw many things she had never seen before and naturally felt different. The ground under her feet was paved with lapis lazuli, and she walked on it silently. Unfortunately, after that gaze disappeared, there was no trace of it. Chu Luiyue looked around but still didn't find anything. She stopped at the corner of a courtyard and sighed softly. In other people's territory she probably couldn't snatch it. She shook her head and decided to put this matter aside for now. However, just as she turned around, a gust of wind blew, and a faint fragrance instantly spread in the air. Chu Luiyue was stunned. This fragrance was the fragrance of peach blossoms? She murmured softly, feeling a little strange in her heart. This aura seemed to be coming from behind her. She half turned around. At the end of this road was a wall. She raised her head slightly, wanting to see the scenery behind the wall. Suddenly, a pink and white peach blossom drifted over with the wind. Chu Luiyue raised his hand to catch it. She took a closer look and was stunned. This peach blossom bloomed just right, but there were a few pieces of sparkling and translucent ice crystals on the petals. She subconsciously raised her hand and touched the peach blossom hairpin on her head. This seems quite similar? The ice crystals contained a chill. Even after falling on the petals for a long time, they did not melt. Chu Luiyue was curious and wanted to go over to take a look. "What are you doing here?" A questioning voice came from behind. Chu Luiyue paused and looked back. It was Yu Qian. Unlike his usual gentle expression at this moment, there was no expression on his face. Even the corners of his eyes and the tips of his brows were cold. There was even a hint of anger in his voice. Obviously, he was very dissatisfied with Chu Luiyue's behavior. Chu Luiyue calmly put away the peach blossom in her hand and smiled. "I was a little bored alone, so I wanted to come out for a walk. Unknowingly, I came here." She looked left and right. "This doesn't seem to be the residence of the divine envoys, right? You can't come here either?" Yu Qian said coldly. "This is one of the forbidden areas of the illusory god palace. No one is allowed to come close." "Oh," Chu Luiyue revealed a look of realization and immediately followed the good advice. "Then I'm sorry I came to the wrong place. Second divine envoy, don't worry, I'll leave now." With that, she really prepared to leave without any reluctance. When she passed by Yu Qian suddenly spoke. "Wait. Second divine envoy, is there anything else?" Yu Qian looked down at her condescendingly, his eyes full of pressure. "Just now. You came here by yourself?" Chu Luiyue smiled. "Yes, what else could it be? Could it be? Or did someone bring me here on purpose?" Yu Qian was the first to deny this possibility in his heart. Not to mention others, even he didn't come to this place very often. On one hand, this place was very remote. If he wanted to come here, he would have to take a lot of detours, which was very troublesome. On the other hand, this was a forbidden area, and there was nothing to see here. Even though he found it unbelievable that Chu Luiyue could find this place purely by herself, he really couldn't think of anyone who would purposely lead her here after thinking about it. Therefore, he could only choose to believe Chu Luiyue's words. Yu Qian nodded. "Let's go. Don't come again in the future." Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly, smiled in response, and then left as if nothing had happened. Soon only Yu Qian was left. He stared at the wall for a long time. Chu Luiyue returned to her residence with familiarity. After entering the room, she stretched out her hand and took out the peach blossom. Suddenly, her expression froze. The peach blossom that was in full bloom earlier had completely changed its appearance. The few ice crystals on it had already melted, and the pinkish-white petals were soaked in water. The layer of color on the surface had faded, revealing a bright gold wrapped inside. Gold? Chu Luiyue was stunned. She had never seen a golden peach blossom before. This was obviously not real. It looked more like it was carved out of special materials. She stretched out her finger and gently rubbed the petals twice. A touch of darkness appeared. "This is actually a peach blossom that's intertwined with gold and darkness?" Chapter 2378. This was indeed not a real peach blossom, but Chu Luiyue stared at it for a long time, but she still couldn't tell what it was made of. After wiping away the faint layer of pinkish white on the outside, the inside was a brilliant gold and a deep black. These two extremely contrasting colors intertwined with each other. She placed the peach blossom in her hand, and when the wind blew, it turned into powder and disappeared. Chu Luiyue stared at it in a daze, and she suddenly felt a sense of loss. She raised her eyes and looked outside. Who else is watching me in the dark in the palace of the illusory god? And what's behind that wall? At this moment, little Hachi brought Aunt 11 and Aunt 12 to sweep through a few mountain ranges before leaving in satisfaction. Back in the courtyard, little Eight's lips curled into a smile. "Go and send the things to your brother Feng Qi. Aunt 11 responded and pulled Aunt 12 to find Jian Fengqi. A moment later, a scream was heard from the room. So many? After a while, Aunt 11 and Aunt 12 walked out of the room and nodded at little Hachi. Sister 8, Brother Fengqi has already agreed to help you refine it. Little Hachi blinked. Is it because of little red fish? The two girls nodded. Little Hachi clicked her tongue. I didn't expect that the young Master Jian, who was untouched by 1,000 flowers back then, would be eaten to death by others. As she spoke, she walked forward in small steps. Aunt 11 looked behind her and suddenly shouted. Sister 8's husband. Yan Qing, who had just walked out of the room, paused in his footsteps. His usually cold and handsome face had a rare look of astonishment. He almost instinctively looked at little Hachi beside him. When little Hachi heard this, she stumbled and almost fell to the ground. She pursed her lips and turned around to look at Aunt 11. From the corner of her eye, she saw Yan Qing standing by the door. The way he looked at me. Little Hachi felt a little embarrassed and hurriedly said, 11th sister, don't shout. He's not Sister 8's husband. It was one thing to deceive outsiders, but how could one's own family misunderstand? He could only blame himself for leaving in such a hurry that he forgot to explain this matter to the two ladies. In the end, they ended up in such an awkward situation. However, little Hachi did not expect that an even more embarrassing scene awaited her. This was because 12 Madam had spoken. She looked at Xiao Ba with a blank expression, then looked at Yan Qing and said in a soft voice, But, Sister 8, didn't you just say that Sister 8's husband is extraordinarily handsome and talented? Isn't he someone that others can compare to? Although her voice was soft, it was quiet in the courtyard. Everyone present could hear her clearly. Little Hachi clutched her chest and almost passed out. 12th sister. Sometimes it's not entirely a good thing that you have a good memory. Even if you wanted to say it, you didn't have to repeat every word so accurately. Little Hachi wanted to be like how she used to be. She wanted to casually joke around and tease her a little to cover up the matter. However, her heart was beating wildly and she could not say a single word. Every time she wanted to open her mouth, the scene of Yan Qing bending over and squatting in front of her to help her put on her shoes appeared in her mind. Her face burned up again and she felt unbearably hot. She had never had a moment like this where she wanted to find a hole in the ground to drill. I was just saying that. Actually, Yan Qing and I. Huh? Wu Yao, who had just returned from a stroll outside, heard these words just as he walked to the entrance of the courtyard. He was stunned and then frowned. Little Hachi, why haven't I heard you mention this before? Little Hachi and Yan Qing were dating? Why didn't he know anything about it? Could it be that they had been together for the past few months in the Illusion God Palace? Do Big Brother and the others know? Little Hachi said with difficulty. Fifth brother, you misunderstood, Wu Yao said disapprovingly. You should have told us clearly about this matter first. That way everyone can help you check, right? What if you meet someone who isn't virtuous? Wu Yao didn't think about it at all. It had always been little 8 who made others sad. She had never been the one to be hurt. Yan Qing's 10,000-year-old iceberg face finally cracked. He was about to speak when Wu Yao looked over. His eyes were full of scrutiny and criticism. He looked at Yan Qing from top to bottom, from left to right, and from inside out several times. Appearance? Well, not bad. Figure? Well, not bad. Strength? Well, barely. After looking at him for a long time, Wu Yao realized that he actually couldn't find any big problems. So he finally said mercifully. Originally, the 13th Yu sect had very high requirements for Little Hachi's future husband. However, since Little Hachi likes you, we can still lower the standards appropriately. After all, her own feelings are the most important. However, Little Hachi has been spoiled and can't bear to be wronged. You have to take good care of her in the future. If I find out that you made her unhappy in the slightest. Little Hachi was completely desperate. She twisted her stiff neck and looked around. Aunt 11 asked, Sister 8, what are you looking for? Little Hachi. Looking for a hoe. She could dig a hole in the ground herself. Anyway, she couldn't stay here anymore. Aunt 11. Little Hachi helplessly pulled Wu Yao's arm weakly. Fifth brother. Fifth brother. Stop it. If he continued, she really couldn't face Yan Qing in the future. Wu Yao glared at her and gave her a look. What are you doing? Yan Qing, this brat, secretly took away their Little Hachi. He couldn't wait to be angry. Shouldn't he say a few more words and educate him? I won't make her unhappy. A clear and cold voice suddenly sounded. Little Hachi was stunned and looked up in surprise. Yan Qing said, I won't let her be wronged. Chapter 2379. Little Hachi was extremely surprised. Her beautiful eyes widened slightly, and she almost suspected that she had misheard. However, Yanqing's expression was as usual, and she really couldn't tell anything from it. If she hadn't heard it with her own ears, it was really hard to imagine that a person like him would actually say such things. As if sensing her gaze, Yanqing turned his eyes slightly and looked over. The two of them looked at each other, and little Hachi's heart instantly tightened. It was probably because this scene was too overwhelming that they were at a loss of what to do. That was why they were acting this way. Fortunately, Yanqing quickly looked away. The subtle sense of oppression instantly disappeared. After listening to Yanqing's answer, Wu Yao reluctantly nodded his head in satisfaction. That's more like it. Then he looked at little Hachi and reminded her. Little Hachi, in the future you and Yanqing. Little Hachi glanced at him sadly and said faintly, "Fifth brother, you can leave if you're done." Wu Yao shuddered and coughed. "Cough, in that case I won't say anything more. You can do as you see fit." After saying that, he was finally willing to leave. Aunt 11 tugged at Aunt 12. "Sister, let's go." Aunt 12 was still a little hesitant. "But, Sister 8 and Sister 8's husband must have something to say. Why are we still staying here?" Aunt 12 suddenly understood. "Whisper?" Aunt 11's expression showed that she was a promising child. Little Hachi's forehead twitched violently. "You too, goodbye, Sister 8. Goodbye, Sister 8's husband." Aunt 4's eyes were sharp and she immediately pulled them away. Only little Hachi, who was flustered in the wind, was left behind. In fact, she also wanted to disappear immediately. But things had turned out like this, and it didn't seem good to just leave like this. She lowered her head, took a deep breath, and walked toward Yanqing. "Lady Yanqing, I'm really sorry," little Hachi said hesitantly. She didn't dare to look at Yanqing. "My 5th brother, 11th sister, and 12th sister have just arrived. They don't know what happened between us, so they misunderstood. Please don't take it to heart." Yanqing nodded with an indifferent expression. "I know." Little Hachi quickly looked up and glanced at Yanqing. Maybe, Yanqing just didn't want her to be too embarrassed, so she said that sentence. "Don't worry, I'll explain it to them later." Yanqing's thin lips moved slightly. The words were on the tip of her tongue, but she changed them. "Yes." Seeing that Yanqing really didn't take this matter to heart, little Hachi breathed a sigh of relief in her heart, but inexplicably felt a little disappointed. However, this feeling was quickly dispelled by her. She turned around and was about to leave. Suddenly, she thought of something and looked back at Yanqing. "By the way, I heard something today. I wonder if you know about it?" "What is it?" "Do you know, the Divine General of the Left?" Yanqing's eyes suddenly darkened. He frowned slightly and looked at little Hachi cautiously. Seeing his expression, little Hachi thought that he didn't know about it either. "You haven't heard of it either?" Yanqing was slightly startled. Little Hachi nodded thoughtfully. "That's right. I've been here for so long, but I haven't heard of this title, let alone you." Yanqing slowly relaxed his hand that was holding the sword. "Why do you suddenly mention this?" Little Hachi shrugged. "Because you have the same name as the Divine General of the Left. Because of this today, Shu Jing deliberately made trouble for me." Yanqing frowned. "Did she make things difficult for you?" Little Hachi's red lips curled up. She winked at him and said with a smile, "How is that possible? Do you think I'm that easy to bully? She wanted you to change your name, but I refused." Speaking of this matter, she instantly forgot all the previous awkwardness. She reached out her hand and tapped Yanqing's shoulder gently. Then she raised her face slightly and said with a bit of pride, "I said that the Divine General of the Left is of noble status. He definitely won't care about such a small matter." Then she had nothing to say. "Even if the Divine General of the Left knows about this, he won't really make things difficult for us, right?" Yanqing lowered his eyes and looked at her. Her smile was like a flower, and her enchanting and charming eyes were filled with a little pride and excitement. Probably because she had just returned from the herb mountain, there was still a faint medicinal fragrance on her body. Mixed with her usual sweet fragrance, it was especially fragrant and intoxicating. His Adam's apple bobbed as he nodded. "Yes, he won't care about this." Little Hachi raised her eyebrows slightly. "I guess so. But..." Yanqing thought that she was going to leave, but he saw her holding her chin with one hand and looking at him thoughtfully. His heart skipped a beat. "But, Lord Yanqing, I think there's something I still need to tell you." Little Hachi said after some consideration. "It's what you said just now. You'd better not tell anyone." Yanqing was slightly startled. "What?" What you said to my fifth brother just now. Little Hachi snorted softly. Since you've helped me a lot, I'll remind you. Although I asked you for help before, you don't have to do so in front of my fifth brother. What if the girl you like hears it in the future and is unhappy? Yen Qing pursed his thin lips slightly. Why would she be unhappy? Little Hachi rolled her eyes at him. Of course it's because you can only say this to the person you like. Yen Qing was silent for a moment and nodded. I see. Yu Qian came to the door of a courtyard. It was as quiet as ever. He frowned slightly and said, First Oracle, Shangguan Yu went to the abandoned garden today. After a moment, an indifferent and low voice came from inside. She didn't go in. Yu Qian's heart skipped a beat. Even if the first oracle didn't go out, he could still easily control the situation of the entire illusory god palace. This was something that he couldn't compare with. Everyone thought that he had almost taken over all the power of the first oracle, but that wasn't the case. The first oracle just didn't go out recently, but in fact he had never really given up his power. Every blade of grass, every tree, every movement, was under his eyes. After a pause, Yu Qian said again, although she didn't go in, the abandoned garden is actually quite far from where she lives, and the path in the middle is complicated. Logically speaking, it's unlikely that she would go there by herself. What are you trying to say? I suspect that someone deliberately lured her there. Who? Yu Qian choked. In fact, this was just his own guess and there was no evidence. For the time being he couldn't say who it was. I don't know. Then go and investigate. The first oracle's voice seemed to be a bit colder. If you can find out, then report. If you can't, then shut up. Yu Qian, do you still need me to teach you the rules of the illusory god palace? Yu Qian was shocked and hurriedly said, yes. He gritted his teeth and couldn't help but speak again. Actually, I just think that there's something wrong with Shangguan Yu. First oracle, when do you plan to take the zither score? Chapter 2380. Chu Luiyue didn't have a bloodline totem, so how did she get in? After Yu Qian went back, he thought for a long time and felt that there was only one possibility, the Guqin score. He knew that the first two Guqin scores were in Chu Luiyue's body and had already recognized her as the master. If he wanted to take them back, letting her into the illusory god palace was the most convenient way. After all, this thing couldn't be taken by force, so he had to use other methods. Therefore, Yu Qian believed that this was the intention of the first divine envoy. But he didn't know what method he was going to use and when he was going to do it. After a while, a cold voice came out. Yu Qian, you've overstepped your boundaries. Yu Qian was shocked. I don't dare. The authority of the Guqin score lies with the divine master, not you. Even I am only temporarily in charge of this matter. Everything is according to the divine master's wishes. And you asked, Yu Qian, why don't I give you the position of the first divine envoy? Yu Qian's heart sank. He immediately lifted his clothes and knelt on the ground. Yu Qian definitely didn't mean that. First divine envoy, please understand. He lowered his head and his whole body was tense. Beads of sweat kept rolling down his forehead and his back was already soaked with cold sweat. The first divine envoy rarely said such words. It could be seen that he was really angry this time. After regaining his senses, he finally realized how stupid it was for him to have asked that question. The illusory god palace wasn't under his control. Above him was the divine master and below him was the first divine envoy. The current situation was definitely what these two wanted to see. How could he have the right to say anything? It was just that for a long time, all the big and small affairs of the illusory god palace were handed over to him to deal with. It made him hallucinate that he had the right to say such words. The people inside didn't respond. The courtyard seemed to have returned to its usual silence. However, Yu Qian didn't dare to get up and could only continue to kneel. He closed his eyes and felt annoyed and regretful. He shouldn't have asked about Chu Luiyue. The second divine envoy knelt in front of the first divine envoy. Hearing Su Li's words, Chu Luiyue withdrew his gaze from the medical book in his hands. He was somewhat surprised. Yes, I heard that he has been kneeling for an entire day since yesterday. When I came here, I saw him from afar and he hasn't gotten up yet. Su Li nodded, her expression filled with emotion. I really didn't expect that the high and mighty second messenger would have such a day. Chu Luiyue thought for a moment, then smiled. After all, he is the second divine envoy, not the first divine envoy. Although the one above didn't show his face much, his status was still higher. That's true. However, I don't know what the second divine envoy did to deserve such a punishment. Su Li rested her chin on her hand. She was puzzled. This Neil really made the second messenger lose all face. As long as the first oracle still had any reservations, he would not have done so. This only proved that the Yu Qian had really angered that person. Now the entire illusory god palace knows about this matter. Everyone is discussing it in private. Although there weren't many people here, this matter was too big and everyone was shocked. However, this news will most likely not spread outside. What a pity. Su Li sighed regretfully. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh. Of course. After all, he is the second divine envoy. If the outside world knew about this matter, the Yu Qian would really lose all face. The prestige that had been accumulated over the years would also collapse in an instant. It seems that the first divine envoy just wanted to teach him a lesson. Su Li agreed. I think so too. However, I don't understand why the first divine envoy would suddenly make a move at this time. Didn't that person ignore the affairs of the world for a long time? Chu Luiyue paused for a moment. Maybe, the first divine envoy will appear soon. There was still half a year before the gate of heaven closed. The first divine envoy seemed to be gradually taking back his authority. Su Li chuckled. It's hard to say, but I feel that the relationship between the divine envoys is really not that good. Her gaze turned and fell on the medical book in Chu Luiyue's hands. Little Yu, I saw you reading this medical book the last 2 times I came. Haven't you already broken through to Supreme Doctor? Chu Luiyue smiled. Above the Supreme Doctor there is still the medical saint. Su Li gasped and looked at her in shock. You plan to break through to the medical saint? But this should be very difficult. I heard that until now, the 8th divine envoy was the only medical saint in the entire illusory god palace. The difficulty of this can be imagined. Moreover, didn't you already enter the illusory god palace? Why did you suddenly think of this matter? Other celestial physicians wanted to break through to the medical saint in order to enter the illusory god palace, but Chu Luiyue obviously didn't need to do so. Medical saint naturally has its benefits, Chu Luiyue said. Su Li stared at her for a long time and sighed. This road would be extremely difficult, but Chu Luiyue clearly intended to continue. If it was someone else, they wouldn't think so much and would just focus on cultivation and wait for the deadline to come in half a year. But she didn't. Chu Luiyue clearly had her own considerations for doing this. Since you've already made up your mind, I won't persuade you. Speaking of which, Chu Luiyue's medical book was borrowed from Treasure Pavilion. There was only one reason why she wanted to break through to the medical saint level. Debao? Ever since she knew Debao's identity, her mood had been very complicated. She had long expected that Debao was inextricably linked to the illusory god palace, but she didn't expect the truth to be so shocking. Xiao Rant's words from that day echoed in her mind from time to time. Purple gold divine armor, an earth-shattering battle. Debao's original divine body was definitely extremely powerful. Unfortunately, in order to save her, he forcefully tempered his divine body and was forced to live in a divine body in the shape of a child. Chu Luiyue thought that perhaps, if she broke through to the medical saint level, she could find a way to help Debao solve this problem. Unfortunately, she hadn't found a way even after flipping through many medical books. And the piece of scale that Debao left behind didn't show any signs of movement. Chu Luiyue looked up at the door. Was Debao afraid of the divine master? Chapter 2381. Yu Qian knelt outside the first god emissary's door for 3 days and 3 nights. This kneeling caused the entire illusory god palace to tremble. Privately, many people were discussing that the first god emissary was preparing to make a high-profile appearance. However, after the incident, the first god emissary still stayed in his residence and did not go out. This caused many people to be puzzled, but no one dared to go forward and ask. What a joke. The second god emissary was already punished to such an extent. If others rushed forward now, wouldn't they be looking for trouble? Thus, compared to before, the atmosphere in the illusory god palace seemed to have become more subtle. Fewer people came out to walk around. Chu Luiyue also stayed in his residence alone for a long time. Of course, it was not because she was afraid of the first god emissary. It was purely because she was busy. Previously in the Red Moon Desert, Debao had shown her many prescriptions. There was no lack of senior doctors and even senior doctors. Although she was not clear when she was learning, she still learned many things subconsciously. This also allowed her to successfully break through to senior doctor and even senior doctor. However, Debao did not give her any prescriptions above senior doctor. Thus, if she wanted to break through, she had to think of another way. Fortunately, she had many herbs in her hands. It was enough for her to try again and again. Su Li knew that she was busy, so she did not come again. It was convenient for her to concentrate on her cultivation. On the Star Road, the Shin formation in front of Xiao Ran was almost complete. There were only a few strokes left in the middle. At this moment, his face was pale and his forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. Even his hands were slightly trembling. It was obvious that he had reached his limit. Only his eyes were burning with an inextinguishable fighting spirit. After being trapped by the Shen formation for so many years, he finally saw hope. He would not give up. The surrounding people were also nervously holding their breaths. If Xiao Ran could also succeed, then he would be the second person after Chu Luiyue to enter the illusory god palace. At that time, there was no need to talk about envy and jealousy. Most importantly, it would also give the other Shen masters great encouragement. If one person succeeded, it might be a coincidence. However, if two people succeeded, it proved that this method could be used by others. Thus, everyone was very concerned about whether Xiao Ran could succeed or not. No one noticed that at this moment, there was a person who was staring at them from behind the crowd. When Lu Feng came over, she saw such a scene. Qi Han held his sword in one hand and stood beside the star path, looking ahead. He walked over and placed a hand on Qi Han's shoulder. Here to see this again? These few days, Qi Han would come here whenever he was free. He was already used to it. She was looking for him just now, but Qi Han had disappeared without a trace. Lu Feng knew that he must be here. Qi Han did not say anything. Lu Feng followed his gaze and rubbed his chin. There doesn't seem to be anything interesting here. What are you looking at? If you're really interested, why don't you give it a try? But you're not a Shen master, so I'm afraid this will be a little troublesome. Qi Han suddenly said, I am. Lu Feng was dumbfounded. What did you say? Qi Han glanced at him. Ever since I left Tianling, I've been learning. Lu Feng? No, that's not something you can learn just because you want to. I remember you didn't have this talent in the past. From the sound of it, it seemed to have started after Master's accident. But this was a mystic cultivator. This required talent. How could he be like a martial artist, cultivating whenever he wanted to? Qi Han said, I only realized this at that time. Lu Feng took a deep breath and forced herself to accept reality. Then, unwilling to give up, she asked. So, what's your level now? Master Shen? And this was a way of giving face. Even for extremely talented Shen masters, it was still very difficult to break through and become a Shen King master in just a few years. Qi Han shook his head. Oh. Lu Feng said, Hey. I knew it. It's fine. Don't be discouraged. Even if he isn't now, he will definitely be in the future. This is the wrong move. Qi Han suddenly said. Lu Feng was stunned. What's wrong? He followed Qi Han's gaze and looked over. Are you talking about Senior Xiao Ran? Isn't this going well? I heard that Senior Xiao Ran had an epiphany after watching Master finish the star path. Since Master has succeeded successfully, then Senior Xiao Ran shouldn't be too bad, right? Why couldn't he see where he went wrong? He changed it back again, Qi Han said. The reason why he walked for so long is because a similar problem occurred before. Xiao Ran did have an epiphany, but it wasn't so simple to do it. In fact, he was able to reach this step because of the accumulation of the previous few years. If it were someone else, they probably wouldn't have been able to take it. Lu Feng stared at the Shen formation with a conflicted expression. Qi Han, why do you seem to know so much? It's about to succeed. Just as Qi Han finished speaking, Xiao Ran drew the last line. Buzz. A buzzing sound suddenly sounded. In an instant, a brilliant light shone. The entire star path flashed again. Xiao Ran had officially cracked the last Shen formation. The fifth divine envoy had been waiting at the side. Seeing this, he nodded slightly. Unlike Chu Luiyue, Xiao Ran had some experience in the illusory god palace. It was only because he was trapped in this last Shen formation for many years that he couldn't enter the illusory god palace. Now that he had succeeded, many people were happy to see him succeed. Although he used more time than Chu Luiyue, he still succeeded. Xiao Ran, congratulations. Ruan Jianfeng's expression became much gentler. Xiao Ran laughed. Thank you, fifth divine envoy. Ruan Jianfeng took a step back. Xiao Ran patted his clothes and let out a long sigh of relief. He stared at the door. He had thought about this day for too long, but it didn't come true. In the end, he didn't even know what he was persevering for. He had thought that if he didn't succeed this time, perhaps he would quietly fall one day. He didn't expect. I have to go in and thank little you, Xiao Ran sighed. Ruan Jianfeng was a little unhappy when he heard this, but he didn't say anything. After all, Chu Luiyue was currently in the illusory god palace. Xiao Ran stretched out his hand and placed it on the door. Then he pushed hard. Unlike Chu Luiyue, he pushed open the door without any resistance. At this moment, countless pairs of eyes fell on him. Lu Feng turned his neck stiffly and looked at Qi Han. "UF asterisk king really know?" Seeing Xiao Ran's figure walk into the illusory god palace, the door closed again. Qi Han turned and left. Lu Feng was stunned. "Hey, where are you going? You haven't answered my question." Qi Han didn't even turn his head and casually left a sentence. "Walk the star path." Chapter 2382. Lu Feng was dumbfounded. What did you say? Star path? No. Qi Han ignored him and walked toward the heavenly gate. If he wanted to walk the star path, he had to start from the beginning. Lu Feng hurriedly followed. "Hey, no, wait a minute. Are you really going to walk the star path?" What was Qi Han thinking? Did he see that Master and Xiao Ran both succeeded, so he wanted to give it a try? If it was before, Lu Feng might not have taken this matter to heart. But after what happened just now, he vaguely realized that Qi Han seemed to be much more powerful than he expected. Moreover, Qi Han was not the kind to joke about such things. Lu Feng caught up with Qi Han and asked as they walked. "Qi Han, how confident are you? Why do you seem to be more familiar with Senior Xiao Ran's Shen formation than he is? Hey, say something. Did you secretly cultivate behind my back?" When Qi Han heard this, he finally opened his mouth. "Do I need to cultivate behind your back?" Lu Feng was speechless. That seemed to be the case. But why did he feel that something was wrong? He said sourly. "We clearly became gods together, and now you want to walk the star path?" He felt like he had been cheated. Qi Han could not be bothered with him. Lu Feng was the same age as him, so they naturally had more freedom when it came to interacting with each other. When they arrived at the heavenly gate, the two found that there was actually an acquaintance here. Wuya. He was standing there with his arms crossed, deep in thought. "Fifth brother." Lu Feng called out. Wu Yao turned around. "Yo, why are you two here too?" Lu Feng spread his hands helplessly. "Qi Han said he wants to walk the star path." Wu Yao looked at Qi Han in surprise and then nodded. "All right, just be careful." Qi Han, "Yes." Lu Feng? "What's going on with you two? Can you show a little bit of attention to the star path?" "Fifth brother, you didn't come here for the star path, did you?" Lu Feng asked weakly. Wu Yao shook his head. "No, I'm here to see the heavenly gate." Lu Feng was speechless. "Fine, I knew I shouldn't have asked. What was so good about the heavenly gates? Even the 11 divine envoys who were in charge of guarding the heavenly gate weren't that attentive, right?" Lu Feng felt that she should find something to do. Otherwise, it would seem that she had nothing to do. Just as he was pondering this question carefully, Qi Han had already stepped onto the star path. A silver light spot instantly lit up under his feet. The first Shen King Division star formation broken. Lu Feng was terrified. Didn't you just say that you're not a Shen King master?" Qi Han continued to move forward expressionlessly. "I am indeed not a Shen King master. I am a Grand Shen King teacher." Inside the room, a medicinal cauldron was placed in the middle of the room. A cluster of flames was burning quietly within. A rich medicinal fragrance gradually spread out from within. At a certain moment, Jian Fengqi finally made his move and slapped the cauldron with his palm. Condense. Bang. Several medicinal pills shot out from the flames in an instant. Jian Fengqi was already prepared. He grabbed the jade box beside him and put all the pills into it. Click. The box closed instantly. Jian Fengqi glanced at it and nodded in satisfaction. "Phew, I'm finally done." These were the pills that he promised to give to Ant 11 and Ant 12. He walked over and put away the medicinal cauldron. Seeing the charred mark on the ground, he could not help but sigh. This was a mark that he accidentally left behind when he tried to break through to Master Doctor. At that time, who would have thought that the days after breaking through to Master Doctor would be like this? Jian Fengqi silently felt sorry for himself. Was it easy to get a wife these days? He weighed the jade box in his hand and planned to go out. When he reached the door, he had just placed one hand on the door when he suddenly realized that something was wrong. He immediately moved his feet. Bang. Mu Hongyu fell from the void and crashed into something. It didn't seem to hurt? She was stunned for a moment. Then she smelled a faint medicinal fragrance. A low laugh came from above. "This time I didn't do anything. You crashed into it yourself." Mu Hongyu immediately looked up. "Jian Fengqi? Why is it you again?" Jian Fengqi was very innocent. "This is my room. Mu Hongyu looked around and found that this was indeed his territory. At this moment he was standing in front of her with his back against the door. His hands were raised high and one of them was holding a jade box. It seemed that she really came here on her own? Mu Hongyu coughed awkwardly and immediately took 2 steps back. Jian Fengqi then saw that there was a pool of blood on her shoulder. His expression changed. "What's with your injury?" Mu Hongyu tilted her shoulder and said vaguely, "It's nothing, just a small injury." How could it be nothing? Jian Fengqi knew that she was trying to break through to Mahayana realm recently. She was constantly traveling through various spaces and would indeed be injured from time to time. But those were at most bumps and bruises. She had never seen blood. But this time the situation was obviously different. Mu Hongyu looked away guiltily. "It's really nothing. I still have something to do. I'll leave first." With that she was about to leave. Jian Fengqi took a step forward and blocked her way. "What's going on?" He had always been carefree and unrestrained, and there was always a smile on his lips. This was the first time he had such an attitude. Mu Hongyu's eyes flashed with a hint of hesitation. Jian Fengqi raised his eyebrows slightly. "You don't want to say? Then I'll go and ask Liu." Mu Hongyu hurriedly grabbed his arm. "Don't go." Jian Fengqi's heart skipped a beat, but when he saw that the blood on her shoulder was still spreading, his expression turned colder. Without any explanation he grabbed Mu Hongyu's wrist and checked the condition of her body. After confirming that she was fine internally and had indeed only suffered a flesh wound, his expression relaxed. But with Mu Hongyu's physique, it was obviously not easy to leave such a wound on her body. He handed over a jade bottle. "Do you want to deal with it yourself or do you want me to help you?" Mu Hongyu hurriedly took it. "I'll do it myself." Jian Fengqi lowered his head and looked at her. Suddenly he chuckled. "With that contract, even if I insist on helping you, you should listen to me." Mu Hongyu glared at him. "What, you want to force me?" Jian Fengqi's lips curled into an evil smile. He leaned over slightly and whispered, "Don't worry, I'm not willing to do that." The two of them were very close to each other. When he spoke, she could feel his warm breath gently. She could even hear his breathing. She was about to speak when she saw a faint luster in his shimmering peach blossom eyes. It was rare for him to be so serious. She blushed slightly and swallowed the rest of her words. She only lowered her head and muttered, "What are you talking about?" Jian Fengqi raised his eyebrows. Mu Hongyu waved at him. "I want to change the dressing. You go out first." That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.